Chapter 623. You really know how to make trouble for me. Luo Nan glared at Cat Eyes in a bad mood after Tian-Si left the underground laboratory. You should be able to tell that senior sister Tian doesn't have any talent in this area. In order to pacify Tian-Si's mood, Luo Nan deliberately sent her to the boundary of the 5th level before walking back. Cat Eyes followed him the entire time, paying no attention to the troublesome situation Tian-Si had created. Yeah, I know. But I thought you were in urgent need of experimental materials. Ha! Luo Nan stopped at the corner of the stairwell. He felt that there was a lack of communication between him and Cat Eyes. Didn't you say that you wanted to readjust your sensing mode? That you wanted to do some filtering based on the configuration? Even though I don't really understand, I can clearly see the look in your eyes. Cat Eyes gestured with 2 fingers and jabbed at him. Luo Nan tilted his head back to avoid being blinded by Cat Eyes' sharp fingernails. You must be drunk. Hee. Don't say that you didn't want me to be your experimental subject. You're baffling. Cat Eyes raised an eyebrow. You look at everything around you, including inanimate objects and living objects. You want to substitute them into configurations, deconstruct and optimize them, right? Oh my, you're... Luo Nan blinked. He swallowed back the words roundworm in your stomach, and so on. However, his expression revealed his true intentions. Do you really think everyone is blind? Cat Eyes sneered and crooked her finger at him. Let me borrow the work area. What? The work area of your drawing software. Luo Nan didn't understand what Cat Eyes meant, but he did as she said and opened up the interface of the work area. Since he had been conducting a simulation calculation of the external configuration of the blood intent ring not too long ago, the interface stopped at that moment. Cat Eyes didn't want to see this. She bluntly operated in Luo Nan's stead, saving and exiting. She flipped back to the starting interface of the previous level. Right now, a simple logo appeared before the eyes of the two. It could be considered a simple drawing of the structure of the blood intent ring, but it was separated out to highlight the wedge-shaped section inside. There was also a line of words below. The content was very simple. It was written by Luo Nan. Without a configuration, there was no way to stand. Cat Eyes chuckled. What a famous saying. Look at this sentence. You want to use configuration to explain everything. Deconstruction and reconstruction, right? Luo Nan coughed. This was the inspiration he obtained from ancient texts. The original words were, if you don't learn poetry, you won't be able to speak. If you don't learn etiquette, you won't be able to stand. This was what Confucius taught his son. He had specially created this interface as a form of motivation for himself. Cat Eyes was quite thoughtful, but her imagination was a bit too big. Don't look at me like that. I'm flustered. Cat Eyes waved her hand. Do you know how much trash we've cleared for you over the past 2 days? Trash? Those tables, chairs, cupboards, and so on that you asked for. Now, the 5th floor is almost full. Do you want to go and admire the current state of the experimental subjects? It's pure corruption. Luo Nan tried to explain. I want to understand the spatial concept of configuration through these simple pieces of furniture. After all, the configuration is intuitive, and the space we're in is too empty. If we want to switch, we need to start from the basics. Cat Eyes raised her hands in surrender. Please spare me. It's fine if you go crazy by yourself. Don't drag me into this. You're the one who's going crazy. Luo Nan cursed silently, but it looked like Cat Eyes' temper was greater than his. I just want to say that if you want to be a Frankenstein, you can just say it. Let everyone be prepared. Others treat you as a savior, but the ark you've sat on is actually a man-devouring demon's lair. Luo Nan frowned. What are you talking about? Cat Eyes stared at him. The Blood Intent Ring and the Abyss Region Fortress are your experimental grounds, right? It's a good idea to test your inspiration, but there are practically all the elite ability users of Xia City there. Don't overdo it and capsize the ship. You'll be a sinner for all eternity. Luo Nan didn't get angry. Instead, he spoke with an extremely certain attitude. The plan I'm bringing out is certainly the most mature plan. In fact, the maturity and firmness of the fortress surpass your imagination. A few cheats, whether they succeed or not, will absolutely not shake the foundation. I'm not talking about that. Then what are you talking about? Even though you haven't been playing with that old hoodlum ghost eye for the past 2 days, do you dare to say that your previous practice was purely for the sake of improving and increasing? Even though there was no one else in the stairwell, Cat Eyes still lowered her voice. I don't know about others, but I'm a cat trapped in your cage. I'm choked to the point of nausea from your killing intent. She reached out to press down on Luo Nan's shoulder as she spoke to this point. She moved closer to his ear and said, "You're definitely thinking of doing something dangerous, right, Mr. Captain? Are you playing in a play?" Luo Nan retorted in a bad mood. He knew that there were some things that he could not hide from Cat Eyes, who was in the same closed system. He didn't bother hiding it either. I have my own considerations. Of course. Of course. It's the same for everyone. But can you not be too impatient? I'm impatient? I'm starting from the basic configuration, bit by bit. Of course it's fine if you keep doing this. You see, I'm helping you find experimental materials, right? But the problem is, don't do things the way you did on the night of the 14th again, okay? Luo Nan's words struck him back to the night of the lecture half a month ago. He really did not understand Cat Eyes' meaning. What happened to me on the 14th? Did the lecture bother you? Hee, I hope you're just purely lecturing. Luo Nan's brows locked tightly as he locked gazes with Cat Eyes. A moment later, his gaze converged and his cheeks drooped slightly. I understand. Yes. While he was lecturing, he had adventured over the Pacific Ocean. He had engaged in a remote contest with 2 extraordinaries. He was indeed under the suspicion of being irresponsible. He had nearly capsized that time. He had implicated over 1,000 ability users of Xia City, who had already mentally traversed to the space fortress. Cat Eyes brought up this matter again after half a month had passed. Was it because she felt that he had been too impatient during this period of time? Luo Nan didn't say anything more. It was good to understand some things tacitly. With the matter of Gong Qi pressing down on his heart, it was hard to avoid being impatient in his actions. He originally wanted to resolve this problem in the near future. He never thought that he would discover an even deeper mystery after taking Rue Wan on a trip to the cloud world. In a certain sense, this was a harvest. A great harvest. But if he didn't handle it well, he would undoubtedly dig a hole for himself. Luo Nan walked back with his head lowered. The layers upon layers of stairs beneath his feet were monotonous and unchanged. But in the end, there was a limit and an end. But if he wanted to dig out the deeper mysteries of the cloud world, it was an enormous project that couldn't be measured. In the face of this enormous workload, killing Gong Qi was like a small problem that wasn't worth mentioning. It was like traversing 100,000 mountains just to pluck a single fruit. That fruit had clearly been within reach not too long ago. This intense contrast really tormented Luo Nan quite a bit. Right now, he would silently recite the word patience several dozen times every morning. Only then would he be able to concentrate his energy and throw himself into the research work of basic configurations. Why did he create his own famous aphorism? This sort of hipster behavior forcefully encouraged himself from the ruins of his anxious and frustrated mental state. Cat Eyes' low voice continued to transmit over. There are some things that can't be done in a short amount of time. It's not bad to put them aside for now. Luo Nan let out a ha. He didn't respond. Cat Eyes continued to speak. Though I don't want to mention it, you are indeed in the position of leader right now. It doesn't matter if they are attracted to you or if they are imprisoned. Many people are acting according to your train of thought and thoughts. You are anxious, and many people can't help but be anxious as well. Can't you see that Rue Wen's state hasn't been good these past 2 days? Oh, I know. Luo Nan had no choice but to speak. Not only did he know that Rue Wen's state was terrible, he also knew the most fundamental reason for this situation. Right now, Luo Nan was referring to the deep layers of the cloud world's configuration fragments. He was studying and understanding the basics of configuration with all his might, using this to correct his own sensing mode. The reason why he did this was to use his most outstanding ability to comb through the structure and foundation of the cloud world. He could penetrate the barriers of space and time and grasp the deeper mysteries of the cloud world. From Luo Nan's perspective, the deep layers of the cloud world's configuration fragments were indeed treasures that he could use as reference. However, his perception was limited, his movements were limited, and he even needed Rue Wen's support to enter and exit. Just the area of black fog that he and Rue Wen were in before was nothing more than a corner of the multi-layered structure of space and time. According to Rue Wen's explanation, the changes in the rules and laws of space were extremely large when one went deeper. It wasn't jumping from Asia to Africa, nor was it jumping from Earth to Mars. It was true space-time travel. Jumping from one space-time to another space-time. The most appropriate comparison was to jump from local space-time to the cloud world. Wasn't it easy? But if the factor of gear was excluded, then think about Gong Qi's current fate. Rue Wen achieved the effect of becoming one with the environment through the chaotic resonance of the multi-layered structure of space and time. She finally penetrated the barriers and realized the jump. The problem was that the deep layers of the cloud world space-time fragments were constantly changing. Sometimes, the timing wasn't coincidental. She could only find an optimal solution with multiple compromises, and then use her own tyrannical explosive strength to penetrate through in one spurt of energy. Luo Nan would never be able to learn this move no matter what. He wouldn't even be able to find an opportunity to rely on his own strength to go back and forth in a short amount of time. Unless he was able to forcefully interfere with the entire structure of the cloud world with overwhelming strength. That would practically be on the level of the creator. It was completely unrealistic. From this angle, even if Rue Wen had taken a shortcut, how easy could it be? Every time Rue Wen entered and exited the cloud world, she did her utmost. Sometimes, she would even respond to Luo Nan's request to explore deeper regions. Therefore, there were a few times when she was so tired that she nearly collapsed. Luo Nan obviously knew about these problems, but he really couldn't do without Rue Wen's support. Damn, he was back to square one. Luo Nan closed his eyes. He pressed down on his forehead, which was already beginning to heat up. He didn't speak for a long time. Torment himself. Torment others. Chapter 624. December 28th. Friday. It was finally the last weekend of the Gregorian calendar. The Chinese and Western festivals were almost over, and there was still more than a month before the traditional spring festival. The students and office workers in Xia City could only hope to hang on to New Year's Day. There were still 3 or 4 days before New Year's Day, but the businesses in the large residential area were still practicing under the lingering warmth of Christmas. Low-end recharges, high-end discounts, and fancy renovations. They had to dig out the last bucket of gold for the year 2096 before the end of the year. As the core area of the large residential area, Cloud City Water Village's high-rise buildings had undoubtedly become the center of activity for the surrounding students and residents. Whenever it was around dinner time, a stream of people could pass through the Water Village's underground parking lot all the way to Aurora Cloud Capital's rooftop observation deck. The taverns and restaurants that were usually lukewarm were also forced to come up with reservation clauses to deal with the huge number of tourists who could not be seen at all. Compared to these, the tea houses, cafes, and cold drink shops scattered around the various buildings as temporary stops for tourists were really hard to find. The group of cadres in the Mystic Arts Research Society found a bar with great difficulty and settled down for the time being. More than 10 people occupied 2 tables, and it was quite crowded. A sharp-eyed person saw that there was a table in the corner of the bar, and only one of the 4 seats was occupied. He said, "There's an empty seat over there. A few of you can go over there." Over there. Hey, that person looks quite familiar. Nonsense. There are at least 10,000 faces in the large residential area. No, look, that person seems to be from our society. Isn't that perfect? We can get together. If he can happily give up his seat, we'll give him an extra 0.1 credit. As he said this, someone got up and prepared to share a table, but as soon as his but left his seat, he was pulled back by his companion. Are you stupid? His companion pouted slightly, indicating that the idiot could see the expressions of some people on the other table. The other table was relatively spacious, and those sitting there were high-ranking cadres, vice presidents, investors, and so on. Among them, it was obvious that OK's baby face was dark, and his gaze was like a knife when he turned his head and glanced at the corner. Sitting diagonally across from him, Fei Jean was holding her chin and smiling subtly. Got it. Thinking of the recent news in the club, many people took a second look and suddenly realized, oh my, it's the legendary one. Why is Luo Nan here? There were some high-ranking members of the society who wished for the whole world to be in chaos. They directly asked the question. OK's face turned even darker. Fei Jin was still smiling, but no one really broke the ice. Others might not know, but all of the high-ranking officials on the platform knew the origin of the devil ray in the lake in front of Gear on the north shore. From beginning to end, no one had ever heard Luo Nan mention this matter. But when the mutant, which was worth 50 to 60 million, was stuffed into the lake as an ornamental fish, this already made clear the hard path and position of that person. Every single one of the society members present had a net worth of hundreds of millions. 50 to 60 million was not a large sum that was worth looking up to. But the reality was right in front of him. He had no ambition for the power of the society at all. He just wanted a laboratory for fun. Who would purposely poke at this guy when they had nothing to do? And so, after a short period of awkwardness, no one brought up the stupid topic of sharing a seat again. They just pretended not to see the person in the corner. The group of people began to order refreshments and drinks. They chatted to pass the time as they waited for the group activity that would soon begin. When they first entered the bar, Fei Jin, well, it should be said that she was possessed. She had already discovered Luo Nan's existence. In addition to the convenience of being a woman, her current position was the best position to observe Luo Nan. She could see Luo Nan in the corner just by raising her eyes, including most of his movements. And it was through Fei Jin's eyes that Lady Halder was able to size up the target she had been pondering for a long time. Lady Halder had adapted to the tool that was Fei Jin these past few days. She was familiar with the structure of Fei Jin's body and soul. She had a general understanding of Fei Jin's social connections. And Luo Nan had been cooped up in the laboratory all this time. It was really a coincidence that they ran into each other today. Coincidence brought opportunity. Lady Halder observed the target in the corner while chatting with a familiar face next to her. She dealt with Yu. The reason why she was able to do this was because there were 2 or more souls placed within Fei Jin's body. Let's put it this way for now. The Blood Flame Order's seizing secret technique wasn't a direct method of possession. Instead, it was like taming a horse or herding a sheep. It used fear as a rein and despair as a fence to direct the behavior of the original soul, causing it to enter a wonderful half-drunk, half-awake state. It used the instincts deeply rooted within the body to deal with the majority of daily situations. When a special situation or a problem occurred, it would be forcefully corrected. This method seemed gentle, but in fact, it burned vital energy to a great extent. It was extremely ruthless, and it would cause unavoidable harm to the host. Lady Halder didn't take it seriously. In any case, many sided wouldn't let this person live after this. Right now, most of Lady Halder's effective attention was focused on Luo Nan's body. From her point of view, including Yin Lu, who temporarily shared this body, Luo Nan's behavior was very strange. Yin Lu heard the news and joined in at the last minute. She observed for a while, but she couldn't understand Luo Nan at all. Why is he being so picky? The virtual workspace opened up on the table in front of Luo Nan. There were many virtual structures that appeared to be parts, fragments, and even lines and strokes. They were densely packed, with many layers interweaving and even twisting together. Luo Nan was like taking out a ball of thread or picking out a toothpick. He meticulously disassembled them, but sometimes he even added a few strokes. The operation appeared to be quite complex. He should be doing some sort of classification work. Lady Halder carefully observed Luo Nan's operation in the virtual workspace, especially the last few steps of the multi-step cycle. It seems that the majority of those fragmented structures are meaningful, at least on the level of ability users. Meaningful? Is it referring to the effect of the interference force flow? This should be the configuration he spoke of and demonstrated. Lady Halder recalled the video materials circulating on the internet. She made a comparison and made a preliminary conclusion. The problem is that the details of the structure seem to have little to do with the Blood Soul Temple. It could also be that the disassembly is too fragmented. After all, there aren't many people who can stand at his height to understand the domain of configuration. I actually believe that rumor. Rumor? Order of Justice, Door of Truth and the like. That nonsense from Ari? What else? Could it be that these fragmented components are all a part of his inspiration? Lady Halder believed that there were geniuses in the world, but she had always made a clear distinction between accumulation and talent. Of course, this wasn't the main point. From their point of view, if Luo Nan's attainments in configuration weren't related to the Blood Soul Temple, then it would truly be troublesome. Why did the Blood Flame Order's First Ablatum and Vice Ablatum attempt to connect with Luo Nan? It was because the white bone mound that appeared in the Jintong Sea of Death was undoubtedly the configuration of the Blood Soul Temple. So they suspected that Luo Nan had a close relationship with Mo Luan, who should have died, but didn't. On the other side, Luo Nan proposed a series of theoretical prototypes such as cage, configuration, and so on. He even developed the blood will ring on this foundation. He built a fortress and successfully established himself in the Abyss district. This method, which was highly similar to the fundamental methods of a secret order, allowed them to see the hope of the Blood Soul Temple structure taking a step further. At this very moment, in a certain corner of the world, the structure of the Blood Soul Temple had already materialized. But the problem was that it wasn't under their control. So whether it was in theory or in practice, they needed a clear fulcrum. They needed to firmly exert their strength so that they wouldn't be left far behind. They would be at a loss of what to do and where to go. Probing, questioning, and seeking support all fell upon Luo Nan's body at the same time. These two goals actually had inherent contradictions. Lady Halder didn't dare to say that she had a foolproof plan. She could only seek further contact with Luo Nan in order to carry out her plan. Fei Jin observed from a distance. The first ablatum and vice ablatum were pondering. With Luo Nan's identity and current situation, he shouldn't be posing in such a crowded place. There should be something he needs to do. Yes, there really is. Fei Jin's eyes swiveled, and her gaze swept over a familiar face that had just entered the door. The person behind her made a special effort to memorize this face. Tianxi. It was a rare normal person who had a close relationship with Luo Nan. She was once a high-ranking member of the Mutual Aid Association. Right now, Tianxi was following closely beside an old woman, blindly following her every step. The old woman was around 80 or 90 years old. Her grizzled hair was cut short and stood up like a boy. It was dazzling, but it appeared refreshing. Her figure was on the thin side, but her complexion was rosy. Her clothes were dignified and conservative, and her posture was ramrod straight. She appeared to have quite the bearing and self-cultivation. A group of people naturally saw the old woman when they passed by the two tables of the Shenyan Society. A few people subconsciously shrank their heads back, but even more people stuck out their butts and stood up to show the most basic respect. Professor Pan. The old woman shot a glance over, but she didn't stop. She just nodded in greeting. Under the complicated gazes of a group of people, she headed straight for the corner of the bar, which was Luo Nan's seat. As for Luo Nan, he was clearly excessively engrossed in the configuration fragments of the virtual work area. He only suddenly woke up when the two people arrived at the table. He didn't even bother to tidy up when he saw the newcomers. He hastily stood up. He was just about to greet them when the old woman across from him opened her mouth to ask, "You're Luo Nan?" Her words were clear and full of energy when she opened her mouth. Her voice was a bit louder than a normal person's. She didn't wait for Luo Nan to respond before speaking with furrowed brows. "You're just like your father. You've been infected with the bad habit of mysticism." Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. He subconsciously said, "Can you not mention him?" The corner of the old woman's mouth curled up. "I don't want to pay attention to that guy either." Luo Nan was fully aware that the atmosphere wasn't quite normal, but he couldn't help but have a good impression of the old woman. Tianxi gave him a meaningful glance at this time, and he remembered to greet her. "Professor Pan, senior sister Tian, please sit." This grizzled-haired old woman was the mentor of Luo Nan's mother, Bo Qingwen. She was the town boss of the school's design department, Professor Pan Wen. Chapter 625. After sitting back down, Luo Nan first closed the virtual work area. Then he followed the process he had envisioned before. He picked up the menu, wanting to ask Professor Pan what he wanted to order. The problem was that the light in his work area had just turned off when old Mrs. Pan, who was sitting across from him, projected her own work area through her wristband. Inside was a set of information forms. Old Mrs. Pan had a dull expression. She tapped on the work area and enlarged the form. "Let me give you a report. I'm quite curious as to what kind of young man would be so indecisive in the face of an old lady's invitation. So I used my authority as a teacher to access your real-time database file and investigate your background." Ha! The final exams haven't started yet, so the statistics of your academic results are flawed. But from the aspects of attendance, in-class tests, performance tracking, and homework completion, you've been growing more and more restless lately. You've been missing quite a few classes, but the procedures are impeccable. You've always been able to pass through dangerous situations. It's filled with the stench of manual labor. Do you know someone with power? You're still using this sort of self-deceiving method in school. You might as well just take a leave of absence. Luo Nan and Tian-si looked at each other. Tian-si had no idea that her teacher had such a trick up her sleeve. She was in a bit of a predicament for a time. As for Luo Nan, he felt a bit dizzy from being smacked in the head like a brick. It was as if he had been kicked back to his teacher's home visit. Only then did he understand what kind of personality Tian-si had described as smart and sharp. Speaking of which, old Mrs. Pan had spoken a bit too deeply with a shallow acquaintance, but Luo Nan couldn't get angry. After all, she was an old lady. She was an elder. She cared about you. He could only rack his brains to think of a way to respond. And at this time, old Mrs. Pan's sharp and strangely clear eyes stared over. So I have to mention that you and your old man are carved from the same mold. You don't come to school to study, to enrich yourself, and to perfect yourself. You don't do proper things. You go and do irrelevant things. You stir up trouble that you shouldn't get involved in. You also stir up the hearts of innocent girls and so on. Professor Pan spoke without thinking, but Tian-si felt quite awkward listening to him. She braced herself and gave the old lady a bit of a reprieve. As for Luo Nan, his head and face were truly covered in dirt. The situation before his eyes was completely different from what he had expected. He practically didn't even have the chance to open his mouth to speak. It wasn't until Tian-si gave him another hint that he came to his senses. He didn't care about what other drinks he ordered and poured a cup of tea for the old lady as a sign of respect. This was supposed to be an entry point, but the problem was that the draft he had painstakingly memorized was now useless. He had no idea what to say next. Luo Nan gaped, but all he did was force out was sweat. Tian-si was worried for him. Just as Luo Nan was about to soothe his cheeks, old Mrs. Pan spun her teacup and raised her chin at Luo Nan. She pointed at the location of the work area. "What are you doing?" Luo Nan let out a long sigh of relief. No matter what, he could finally start a normal conversation. He hurriedly replied, "I'm doing some categorization work." He wanted to open up the work area once more and let the old lady look over it, but the old lady shook her head and refused. "There's no need to show me. I'm different from your father. I'm not interested in things that aren't in my field of expertise." Luo Nan was a bit startled, but he finally found an opportunity to cut to the chase. He didn't have the time to think too much and just said, "Professor Pan, my father was annoying back then. Let's not talk about him, okay? Actually, I've always wanted to know what my mother was like back in school. Can you tell me about it?" Professor Pan Wen's expression was calm. He just used his fingers to pinch the handle of his teacup. He had no intention of starting a conversation. Luo Nan could only brace himself and continue. "You might not know this, but I've always lived with my aunt and uncle. I don't understand the situation back then at all. No one told me." Luo Nan saw that he couldn't continue, so he could only cast his pleading eyes toward Tian-si. But then old Mrs. Pan's resonant voice entered his ears. Qingwen was probably like this when she was in school. She did what she needed to do and dealt with the problems she was best at. "Old Mrs. Pan, why are you mocking me?" Luo Nan simply wanted to slap the table to death. Tian-si opened her mouth to speak, but she was stopped by old Mrs. Pan's stern gaze. Old Mrs. Pan didn't say anything after that. She just watched Luo Nan's expression. Just as the young man was embarrassed and reserved to the extreme, her fingers left the handle of her teacup and she slowly stood up. "Since you're so nervous yourself, then this old woman won't be an eyesore here. I have a family banquet today, and it just so happens that it's upstairs. I'll head over directly." This was it? Luo Nan stood up, bewildered. He didn't know whether he should urge her to stay or let out a sigh of relief. Tian-si didn't dare to say anything. She could only give Luo Nan a comforting gaze and extend her hand to help the old woman out of her seat. But her actions were reprimanded in the blink of an eye. "I can't recognize the road anymore. Can't I walk?" This was the first time Tian-si encountered such a situation ever since she came into contact with Professor Pan Wen. She was scared stiff on the spot. The two youngsters watched as the old woman moved out of her seat and walked out. They wanted to speak, but they didn't have the courage to do so. Luo Nan could only give Tianxi a meaningful glance, indicating that she should follow behind to avoid a situation. Tianxi took a deep breath and calmed herself down a bit. She nodded in understanding. Just as they were exchanging meaningful glances, the old woman in front of them suddenly stood still. She half turned around and said, "Luo Nan." "Right. Ha. Yes, Professor Pan." Luo Nan subconsciously straightened his body. Old Mrs. Pan's expression didn't change. She just looked Luo Nan up and down a few times before speaking. "I can only say that your appearance isn't ugly. I heard that your family's conditions aren't that extravagant, and your glib tongue isn't that nimble. Presumably, you don't rely on your face, money, or flowery words to live. Of course, you don't have the temperament of a leader. You have no way of making others bow down to you." Luo Nan was stupefied. He didn't know whether or not he should accept these evaluations. Old Mrs. Pan continued to speak, "But even so, you still have Tianxi and a few people to help you. You can even change the school's database. It's impossible to do this just by relying on a person. I think that at the very least, you should be relying on your own ability to make a living." "Ah. If that's the case, then you're similar to Qingwen. That's good." The old woman suddenly smiled. The wrinkles at the corner of her eyes bloomed, but it was gentle, calm, and peaceful. Then she turned around once more. Her steps were gentle, and she walked against the flow of people as she left, step by step. However, the last 3 words lingered between her lips and teeth, echoing in Luo Nan's ears. Chapter 626. The people of the Mystic Research Society were certainly unable to hear the conversation between the old lady and the young man in the corner. However, the odd atmosphere was enough for some people to see some clues. There were professional enthusiasts like OK among the high-level cadres of the Mystic Arts Research Society. There were also gossip lords who were extremely interested in private relationships. What's going on between Old Lady Pan and this Luo guy? Even if a 10th grade kid used his connections, he wouldn't be able to get into the School of Design. Where the hell did you guys do your homework when you were bidding? The designer of North Bank Gear is this bro's mother. Looking at the time, he was probably Old Lady Pan's disciple back in the day. Oh, I remember now. A few days ago, Xie Junping chattered on endlessly. I got tired of listening to him, so I automatically blocked it. With this gossip lord mentioning it, it was hard for the two platforms to deliberately ignore Luo Nan's existence. The direction of the discussion naturally changed. Luo Nan's name was like a thunderclap piercing the ears of this group of cadres of the Mystic Research Society during this period of time. Sealing off the 3rd underground floor, directly confronting Vice President OK, raising a devil ray. These methods simply made it clear that Luo Nan was a big shot. This was a big shot that had appeared out of nowhere. Random people should get out of the way. But this kid clearly didn't even make it to the last bus to join the society. It seemed like his family background wasn't particularly outstanding. Was this gorgeous turn of events meant to harm the eyes of the people of the Mystic Research Society? Such an abrupt turn of events naturally created enough topics of discussion. If one were to dig deeper, there would be enough gossip waiting to be discovered or created. After pondering a few times, someone really did dig out a bit of information. Speaking of which, I've heard this name before. Hehe. You guys probably won't be able to guess who brought it up. The suspenseful technique was clumsy enough, but the timing was good. Others would pinch their noses and support him. The suspenseful person didn't let the gossip lord enjoy the limelight amidst a bunch of jeers. He successfully attracted a wave of attention. Only then did he reveal the answer. It's our great president. President? Tangy? I just remembered it. That was at the end of September, right? The club shares hadn't changed yet, so I was in charge of the entrance test for new members. At that time, Senior Sister Tang was pretty much out of the picture and was only a vice president in name. But that day, she specifically came over to greet me, saying that she would take care of Luo Nan during the interview. In the end, Luo Nan didn't come at all. That's why I have such an impression. Hey, what's their relationship? Keeping him in suspense, he said. He said he's my friend's younger brother. Friend? Man? No, girlfriend? He. In any case, there was one point that could be emphasized after a round of discussion. This fellow Luo Nan had help both inside and outside. Though his background was fuzzy, it could be seen from his performance that he was solid even within the Mystic Arts Research Society, where the second generation gathered. Therefore, if he could avoid provoking them, he would. Professor Pan Wen left her seat at this time. She refused to support her, but Luo Nan and Tianxi still wanted to see her off. The three walked past one after another. The two tables also shut their mouths. Those who had stood up with their buttocks in the air just now had to do it again, regardless of whether the old lady agreed or not. The two tables of the Mystic Research Society finally let out a sigh of relief when the three of them left the water. The topic of conversation became even more open. There were even people who began to feel injustice for OK. It's because of old Xie's nagging and some people's messy help that a lot of things weren't done smoothly during the theme week. Later on, it's like an aquarium. OK didn't appreciate these remarks at all. His face turned even greener. 8 Trigram Lord had a good relationship with O Quebec. He sat next to OK, so he patted OK's arm and comforted him. Don't lower yourself to the level of this idiot. I heard that this bro's mother died early. He lacked love since he was young, so he drew a circle to occupy it like a family dog. He probably thinks that place is his mother's embrace and he's secretly crying. These words amused quite a few people. Actually, 8 Trigram Lord was a bit afraid of Luo Nan. But he liked to take advantage of people with his glib tongue. He saw Luo Nan leave the room, and he laughed and added, "What do you guys think? From that bro's point of view, if someone were to go in and out of those floors, wouldn't it be the same as?" Oh my god! A cup of half-hot coffee was directly splashed onto 8 Trigram Lord's face. His eyes, nose and mouth weren't spared. There was also his collar and front lapel. It was truly hot, painful, and embarrassing. At this moment, not to mention the two nearby tables, even the surrounding area was stunned by the sudden change in the situation. The water bar actually went silent for half a second. "Fei Jin, are you King sick?" 8 Trigram Lord suddenly jumped 3 feet into the air. There was still coffee dripping down from his eyelashes. He had to wipe his hands, but his hands were spread apart. He looked like a duck that had been doused in boiling water. As for Fei Jin, the instigator of all this, she slowly put down her murder weapon. She had an elegant demeanor and responded with a faint smile. "I saved your life. No need to thank me." 8 Trigram Lord's mind exploded. King. Old Chow, old Chow. Go wash up first. Only then did someone come to their senses. They hurriedly stood up to stop the fight. No matter who was right or wrong, they had to first persuade them to leave. This was to avoid making an even bigger joke in public. 8 Trigram Lord's brain was basically muddled right now, but he was still subconsciously afraid of Fei Jin. He was pulled away by the people around him, and he subconsciously stepped down from the slope. He walked out of his seat while cursing and waving away the support of others. He also tried his best to block out the strange gazes of the people around him as he walked to the bathroom. But before he could take 2 steps, someone passed by in front of him, blocking his path. He raised his head and saw Luo Nan's young and inexperienced face. "He's back?" 8 Trigram Lord and Luo Nan looked face to face. He shivered in the next second and instinctively averted his gaze. It was also at this moment that cold air clearly grew in his cranial cavity. Even his brain juice was about to freeze. "He wants to kill me." An inexplicable thought popped out and pounded on his heart. Actually, Luo Nan didn't move at all. He just crossed paths with 8 Trigram Lord. 8 Trigram Lord's mind was in a mess. He simply didn't notice the multifunctional robot in front of him that was delivering refreshments. He just bumped into it and flipped the tray over. He even had to drink the boiling hot coffee. He screamed miserably and lost his balance. His face fell to the ground, bringing about another wave of chaos. 8 Trigram Lord's miserable state was right in front of them, but the two tables of the Mystical Research Society weren't able to react in time. The reason was very simple. Luo Nan's gaze streaked across the two tables as he walked back. The cold air seemed to be able to completely freeze the hot drinks on the two tables. Of course, the people's reactions and courage were frozen as well. Only when Luo Nan and Tianxi sat back down did someone from the Mystical Research Society get up to check on 8 Trigram Lord's situation. They helped him clean up and treat him. The others looked at each other in dismay. A few high-ranking officers finally reacted. They lowered their voices to the lowest level. That person seems to be from the circle? Huh. He's the government, the military, or a special person from the Starry Sky Club. I'm C. Oh, no wonder. Why don't we leave? It's too obvious. After all, the Mystic Arts Research Society was considered a professional hobbyist organization. Plus, they were situated in a high-ranking domain with social authority. They had some understanding and contact with some half-true and half-false channels and circles. They soon discovered the mistake in the topic of discussion just now. There was nothing wrong with people with simple backgrounds. There was nothing wrong with people with simple abilities. However, it was very hard to deal with people with both backgrounds and abilities. This was especially true for these freaks who possessed some sort of super social attribute. Maybe I should hire a bodyguard in a related field. Hee. A lackey who wears an exoskeleton armor every day? In the short term, it won't just be through the channels of the military. The problem is that we don't have any right now, okay? The group of high-ranking officers were undoubtedly in a difficult position. Only Fei Jean had a smile on her face from beginning to end. It was as if she hadn't been the one splashing that person's face just now. Many of her companions had no choice but to admire her information channels and decisiveness from such an enigmatic attitude. Some people tried to get some clues, but Fei Jean didn't refuse. She casually chatted awkwardly with this group of people. Her main focus was still on Luo Nan. She watched as Luo Nan and Tianxi sat back in the corner and conversed in low voices. She was thankful for Gossip Lord's stupidity. When Luo Nan's ice-cold gaze swept past earlier, it was only when he looked at her that his gaze softened. This was a good start. However, the controller behind Fei Jean didn't have any intentions of striking while the iron was hot. She paid close attention to the various details in the corner with interest. She combined it with the harvests from her previous observations and gradually came up with a basic train of thought. Inlu. Boss. I remember that Multifaceted sent out an intelligence topic a few days ago. It's closely related to this person. They even invited an expert to conduct a psychological diagnosis. The name should be Persona. Ian Lee's memory was trustworthy. Yes, a persona. Mrs. Holder smiled. That's just a half-finished product, and the fee is so expensive. However, it's worth it now. Bring me that intelligence report. If everything goes smoothly, we'll know how to communicate with this person. The first and deputy oblatums of the Blood Flame Order were in a temporary foothold in Xia City. It was very easy for them to search through the information. They soon found the intelligence report that was being paid for. This intelligence report was more or less a summary. It specifically extracted information on Luo Nan's social interactions and carried out a relevant psychological analysis. The problem was that no matter how authoritative an expert in psychology was, it would be hard for them to determine the nature of an ability user, especially a powerful character. After all, every ability user more or less possessed a supersocial attribute. Even in terms of pathology, the structure of the body and soul would undergo structural changes to a greater or lesser degree. On a medical level, it could even be diagnosed as an organic lesion. Of course, this was far from the main point. Luo Nan's situation might be even more complicated. It was said that this person had been undergoing body modifications through injecting nerve drugs starting from the age of 10. Any expert would be flabbergasted when faced with Luo Nan's greatly mutated nervous system structure. They would be speechless. They could only make assumptions based on the external performance of the target. They could only make a general analysis and judgment. The conclusions drawn from Luo Nan's situation were rather rough. They weren't even convincing. Chapter 627. Dissociative Identity Disorder. Multiple Personality Disorder? Ever since DID appeared in the world, it had always been the subject of doubt. There were even quite a few experts and scholars who didn't believe that such a case truly existed in the world. Many times, similar diagnoses were unable to convince the masses. Ian Lu was one of those people who weren't convinced. Dead? It's still latent? The diagnosis is too vague. Mrs. Holder laughed involuntarily. If you think the conclusion is oily, then you don't need to care about it. Those experts can't do mental and pathological tests. All diagnoses are like scratching an itch through their boots. It's better for us to figure it out ourselves. I'm more interested in the logic behind Multifaceted's name. Her intuition and judgment are sometimes more reliable than those so-called experts. As she spoke, Mrs. Holder opened the intelligence folder. There were statements, analyses, and even more valuable first-hand videos. The folder displayed all of Luo Nan's social interactions in public since his debut. What was especially valuable was the battle scene of Luo Nan making a name for himself in Ocean Sky Cloud City with several people from headquarters. It came from the surrounding monitoring system. There was also a portion of it. It was the footage of a series of clashes before and after the incident at the Municipal Plaza. This was the information recorded by the Psychic Wave Network. It was of a very high secret level in the Xia City branch, but it had been retrieved by the all-powerful multifaceted Sun Jiari. In addition, there were recordings of semi-public and semi-private areas of Acumen College, Aurora Cloud City, and others. Mrs. Holder followed her own train of thought and reclassified the above information. Her methods were very clear. She classified Luo Nan's interactions with his family and friends in the secular world into one category. She classified Luo Nan's interactions with members of the inner world into one category. In addition, she classified Luo Nan's discussions of cultivation theory and lectures into one category. Yinlu looked at the rearrangement of all kinds of information and thought about what Mrs. Holder had said before. She had a faint understanding. Boss, you want to start with Luo Nan's personality. Subdivide the persona? Mrs. Holder just minded her own business and just nodded slightly. The so-called persona was a relatively traditional concept of psychoanalysis. It roughly referred to a set of systematic patterns produced by the human body in order to adapt to the outside world. It could also be said that it was the outer layer of one's personality that concealed one's true self. Simply speaking, the persona was a person's social nature. Every person had many kinds of masks. Each mask was a facet of their social nature. When put together, they would form a complete personality. This concept originated from Jung's personality analysis psychology theory at the beginning of the last century. This theory was no longer at the forefront of academia, but it could still play a role in related fields. This was especially true for its core, personality holism, which treated the mind as the object of research. It had a miraculous synergy with the mind and soul, which was why it was more suitable for use on ability users. In recent years, the otherworld variant of this theory had maintained a certain level of popularity. Yinlu was the vice officiant of the Blood Flame Order. Even if she had always been a little neglectful, she still had to study the control of the believer's desires. With Madame Holder's reminder, she immediately had a lot of ideas. But she also understood that these hasty thoughts couldn't withstand serious scrutiny, so she still asked honestly, "What's the matter? Boss, is there any chance for us to cut in? That depends on whether we can accurately capture his dominant mask." According to this theory, there was no distinction between the real and the fake when everyone had multiple masks. One just needed to look at which mask was used the most often to be considered the dominant mask. It could basically encompass the most basic personality traits. However, there were many times when there was more than one dominant mask. Madame Holder already had a basic judgment. Luo Nan is a relatively simple person. Right now, he has several external masks, and he can more or less form a complete personality. She pulled out the list of information on Luo Nan's interactions with his family and friends. She arranged them in chronological order, forming a fairly clear timeline. There's no need to mention this person's miserable childhood. It has certainly influenced his personality traits. Luo Shuqing and Mo Haiheng have become his guardians, and their attitudes and behavior have been extremely positive. They even dote on him a bit as compensation. Their biological children are actually inferior to him in terms of treatment. He is the one being taken care of in his family and in normal social relationships. From the information, we can see that Luo Nan's older cousin, Mo Ya, is quite powerful. His older cousin, Mo Peng, is quite lively, but he is quite protective of Luo Nan. The stimulation of these two personalities, as well as the difference in treatment, will likely push him to grow in the opposite direction. This is because this will allow him to maximize his profits. This interaction has caused him to be both sensitive and introverted, but he is also obedient and low-key. He has displayed a weak and passive side. Yinlu concluded in a low voice. The weaker he is, the more he is favored. Of course, This wasn't the result of Luo Nan taking the initiative to exert his strength. Instead, it was the long-term effects of his unconscious infiltration. Yes, this is Luo Nan's mask of weakness. It is the mode of communication he is most accustomed to using over the years. Then this is one of his dominant masks. Madame Holder didn't directly confirm this. Instead, she interrupted her analysis and observed Luo Nan's corner through Fei Jin's eyes. At this time, Luo Nan was conversing with Tianxi in the corner. Madame Holder and Yin Lu didn't use any supernatural methods due to their fear of this master of perception. They just used their professional lip-reading abilities to guess the conversation between the two. The subject of the conversation was still Professor Pan Wen. The old woman's sharp personality and attitude, as well as her intense mood swings, made Luo Nan a bit unsure. His mind was in a mess. Most of the time, it was Tianxi who comforted him. This was probably Luo Nan's behavior under the guidance of the mask of weakness. It could be seen that Tianxi wasn't quite used to it. She most likely never expected that she would use this sort of position to communicate with Luo Nan. She was facing a weak, unconfident, and even sentimental little Shota. This gave her quite a bit of trouble, as she wholeheartedly hoped to hug his thigh. Even Yin Lu felt a bit strange, let alone Tianxi. This was completely incompatible with Professor Luo, who was currently at the peak of his power. Fortunately, her train of thought grew clearer. Though I don't approve of the diagnosis of latent did, from the relevant data, the separateness and contradiction of his mask of weakness are quite obvious. In contrast to the mask of weakness, there must be a mask of strength that possesses a dominant strength. Madame Holder simply said, "You analyze it." This. Yin Lu hesitated a bit. She simply took Madame Holder's preliminary categorization of the data. She copied Madame Holder and pulled out the records of Luo Nan's official contact with the inner world. She sorted them by time and sorted them out. Looking at the formation mechanism of the mask of weakness, there are two types: imitation and practical application. I feel that aside from the bits and pieces he learned from his family and friends, the greatest source of his paradigm and practical environment can only come from the inner world. Yin Lu paused for a bit and stole a glance at her boss's expression. Only then did she continue to make inferences. From the relevant intelligence, Luo Nan was suddenly pushed into a high-danger level event. There was practically no buffer at all, and the intensity was extremely shocking. Luo Nan witnessed many casualties and unforeseen events with the human-faced arachnid. Then, it was said that he directly participated in the underground fighting arena incident. He followed it from start to finish, and it involved high-intensity confrontations. The Frost River reality incident on Fudong Avenue involved high-intensity confrontations, large-scale killings, and he was heavily injured. Then, there was Ocean Sky Cloud City. He directly killed people, and he killed 4 people at once. Then, there was the series of conflicts in the municipal plaza. Extraordinary level attacks and defenses. The 2000s of a young lady incident. Let's not even talk about it. From this series of events, we can see the ecology of the inner world in Luo Nan's eyes. Of course, he personally experienced it. It was a continuous, intense, and high-intensity conflict. There was no lack of paradigms and environments. Luo Nan himself had the corresponding talent and ability. He quickly formed a direct, unyielding, and cruel mask of strength. It was reasonable. Mrs. Holder's expression didn't change. She asked without thinking, "And then?" And then the mask of weakness that has always occupied a dominant position for over a decade was far too different from the mask of strength that had just been formed. It led to separation and conflict. Halfway through her words, Yin Li's gaze swept across the information that had basically been categorized. However, there were clearly 3 groups of information. She suddenly became speechless. Holder didn't reprimand nor did he give any pointers. He continued to do the finishing work of categorizing the information. Instead, there were some changes in the corner where Luo Nan was located several dozen kilometers away. Tianxi's face revealed an astonished expression. She hesitated for a moment before getting up and sitting next to Luo Nan. The two of them leaned against each other, looking quite intimate. Some people subconsciously curled their lips at the 2 tables of the Mystic Arts Research Society, but no one dared to open their mouths to say anything. Let's turn back time to half a minute ago. Tianxi had been struggling with Luo Nan's weak and wavering emotions ever since she returned to her seat. No matter how hard she tried, she found it hard to find the cold and callous element of subsonic life taking control of the demon from this youth. However, there was a very subtle sensation. A corner of her heart churned as she looked at Luo Nan like this. Just when she thought that the time they spent together tonight was about to be exhausted by this bizarre scene, Luo Nan's wristband vibrated. Ding dong. A message entered Luo Nan's private mailbox. It was a notification. Luo Nan was stunned. His main communication tools were the Hexa ear and his wristband. He mainly used instant messaging and messages. He would occasionally use the cloud space. This mailbox was only used for identity registration. It was practically in a half-abandoned state. Why would someone send him a message? He lowered his head, and the wristband's intelligence captured the corresponding stimulus. A virtual interface popped up, highlighting the title and sender of the message. The title of the message was the default, no topic. But under the rules of social authority, all formal communication on the internet required real name authentication. So Luo Nan saw a name that he could intuitively perceive. Chapter 628. This is Professor Pan's email number? Luo Nan was greatly surprised. Tianxi tilted her head to size it up. She confirmed, that's right. This is Professor Pan's private email. She set up her own server. I still remember the domain name. The content of the email was just a link. Luo Nan clicked on it without hesitation. The link led to a cloud space. Encryption measures were set up here. It was a privilege encryption. Only visitors allowed by the owner of the cloud space could enter with their ID. Luo Nan didn't pay much attention to the encryption method. He cut into the interface, and his gaze fell on the highest folder in the cloud space. His gaze was a bit blank. The only folder that could be displayed was named Applied Research on the Couple Design of Modern Architecture, Draft. Luo Nan clicked on the folder 2 seconds later, and a message appeared. The target folder was approximately 4 petabytes in size. There were several folders and files inside. This storage number wasn't large, but it wasn't small either. Some people wouldn't be able to store a lifetime's worth of experience inside, but in some fields, it didn't seem to be much. Luo Nan's fingers trembled slightly, and he clicked on it. A traditional window interface was laid out. The densely packed folders gave people a headache at first glance. But from another perspective, every folder was named according to an obvious rule. Letters, numbers, and words were clearly layered. One could vaguely feel the structure and flow of a certain system if one looked at it carefully. Luo Nan scrolled through the interface and scrolled down to the bottom. The interface naturally captured the only document file on the interface. The name was exactly the same as the folder on the upper layer. Applied Research on the Couple Design of Modern Architecture, Draft. Luo Nan's face twitched. He clicked on it again, and sure enough, it was a thesis. Since it was a draft, the format was relatively casual. His gaze skimmed over it, and it fell on the author's signature below the title. It was impossible for him to overlook it, and it was impossible for him to forget it. Bo Qingwen. Luo Nan's gaze froze. He subconsciously scrolled through the interface during this time, but the words, tables and diagrams inside seemed to have lost all meaning. Or perhaps his brain had lost the ability to accept and understand. It wasn't until he flipped to the end of the thesis that he saw the scattered sentences that were clearly unfinished, as well as the deliberately left blank space. Only then did he vaguely grasp a bit of context. Senior, come over here. Luo Nan didn't even know how he opened his mouth to speak. Tianxi hesitated for a moment. She was most likely frightened by Luo Nan's expression and tone, but she still got up and sat beside him. His gaze, which he had intentionally shifted to avoid arousing suspicion, was now naturally directed towards the virtual interface. At this time, Luo Nan had already brought the interface back to the first page of the article, revealing the title and author. When Tianxi saw these, she also jumped in fright and almost cried out. Yes. Senior sister, my mind is in a mess now and I can't remember clearly. You've checked the relevant information. Is this one among my mother's published papers? Tianxi immediately replied. No, definitely not. Really? Luo Nan grinned. This gift from Professor Pan is really His fingers unconsciously slid across the screen, and the interface also scrolled up and down. Beside him, Tianxi said, "Junior, look at this table of contents. It doesn't look like a thesis, but more like a book, an academic monograph." Luo Nan was a bit startled. He followed the direction of Tianxi's finger and looked. Then he immediately switched to the folder interface. But there were at least 100 folders of the same level. It was impossible to count them all at once. He decided to open up the system and look at the attributes. With just one glance, he had an idea. As expected, there are more than 4,000 folders of different levels and more than 100,000 documents. If they are all reference materials for the thesis, it would be too exaggerated. But if it's a book, then it seems like it has just begun. He looked at the last edited date. It was actually May 2080, a little over a month before he was born. Luo Nan estimated that his mother should be in the wilderness at that time. No, it was also possible that Professor Pan had started writing. Luo Nan's mind was in a mess. Right now, it really wasn't suitable for him to do more complex analysis. He could only forcefully turn his gaze away. And at this time, he saw new information on the side of the system interface. It was the list of visitors who had access to the cloud space. Of course, Luo Nan was on the list, and there were only 3 people who had access to the cloud space. One of them was Professor Pan Wen. Right now, he was displayed as logged in. As for the other 2 gray names, Bo Qingwen, Luo Zhongheng, the interface suddenly closed. This was done by Luo Nan. This was because he might not be able to control his emotions in another half a second. In fact, at this moment, the tea on the table was already rippling. "Let's go." Luo Nan didn't dare to sit any longer. He got up in a bit of a hurry, raised his head, and took a deep breath. Beside him, Tianxi got up to make way. She asked, "Let's go." Luo Nan didn't say anything. He walked straight out, and Tianxi hurried to keep up. The 2 left the water bar with quick steps, causing the group of people from the Mystic Arts Research Society to let out sighs of relief. Previously, whether they should stay or leave had already made them very conflicted. Fortunately, after passionate love and intimate contact, they left first. Someone mumbled, "He's definitely going to vent." "Shut up!" Shouts rang out in unison, forcefully suppressing this idiot who didn't know the difference between life and death. Fei Jin watched with a smile. She didn't react. But 2 minutes later, she found a random reason and took her leave, separating from this group of people. She didn't care about the discussions of the people behind her. She didn't plan on wasting time in Ocean Sky Cloud City, so she went straight back. With Luo Nan's situation, it was impossible for him to stay too long in this crowded area. Otherwise, the security personnel by his side would probably go crazy. Right now there were 2 possibilities. One was to go home. The other was to return to Gear on the North Bank. With Fei Jin's status, she could only choose the latter. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor underground and prepared to take the short tram back to school. But just as she squeezed out of the elevator with the stream of people, her mind suddenly stirred. She raised her head and saw Luo Nan's figure standing in the corner up ahead. He seemed to be talking to someone. Tianxi stood to the side, quite a distance away. She even turned her face away a bit unnaturally. Clearly, she hadn't blended in with the conversation. Her role was quite awkward. As for the person talking to Luo Nan, he was leaning against the wall. From Fei Jin's angle, only half of his brightly colored sportswear could be seen. He looked very young. The 2 controllers behind Fei Jin did not expect this to happen. This was indeed a chance encounter. But if it wasn't handled well, it would be no different from being followed in the eyes of Luo Nan, a master of perception. Luckily, Fei Jin's main controller was rich in experience. She didn't change the frequency of her steps. She continued to walk forward, and she even called out a greeting when she got closer. As expected, Luo Nan turned his head to glance at her. His face was expressionless, but Tianxi next to him turned her head. She was a bit surprised. Tianxi's actions made the person on the other side of the corner lean over in curiosity. He whistled and said, "Another beauty. Your talent in this area isn't bad." His lively and frivolous reaction was indeed that of a young man. But at this moment, the 2 first oblatums, who were several dozen kilometers away, were the ones who were shocked. Tian Bang! Yinlu cried out involuntarily. She was shocked, but there was also loathing and hatred. That's right. The person in the corner was Tianbang, who had made a name for himself some time ago. This burner, known as the #1 person beneath extraordinaries, was dressed in overly gaudy casual sports attire. He was like a Chunibyu youth who couldn't keep up with the trends. But it was this person who had stepped on Mo Luan and the Blood Flame Order and leaped up to stand at the center of the world stage. He was the mortal enemy of the Blood Flame Order. This was without a doubt. Such a mortal enemy had suddenly appeared before their eyes. Moreover, he was conversing intimately with another important target. What in the world was going on? The two controllers could not help but have similar thoughts in their minds. And at the scene, Fei Jin's footsteps stopped for a moment. Her gaze swept past Tianbang's face. Her eyes were mixed with a series of micro-expressions of curiosity, astonishment, and realization. In the end, her focus returned to Luo Nan, Junior's friend. I won't disturb you any longer. You guys chat. Fei Jin smiled as she spoke. She gave a slight bow and walked a few steps to the side. She turned her head in a very natural manner and sized up Tianbang with a few glances. Then she turned her head and left. As the first mate, Yinlu admired Mrs. Halder's control of her emotions and details to the point of prostrating herself. Fei Jin, who had been under Mrs. Halder's control just now, had perfectly displayed the subtlety of a member of the outer circle encountering a heavyweight character like Tianbang. She had successfully recognized and secretly restrained herself. Forceful words were all about the details, but the most wonderful thing was still the word, natural. The automatic conveyor belt brought Fei Jin far away. Yinlu was still reflecting on the subtlety of their encounter when Mrs. Halder spoke. Did you feel it? Tianbang's current position had already exceeded the range of Fei Jin's natural perception. Yinlu would not make a low-level mistake and forcefully use an ability user's ability to detect him. So for a time, she really couldn't understand. She frowned and said, Tianbang appeared here. I'm not talking about Tianbang. What does the matter we're currently handling have to do with Tianbang? Luo Nan? Yinlu struggled to free her attention from Tianbang with great difficulty. She seriously recalled Luo Nan's previous performance. It seems that his relationship with Tianbang is quite cold. Do you have a more precise description? Mrs. Halder's tone seemed to be a bit dissatisfied. Yinlu just felt a mountain of pressure. She racked her brains to ponder, practically replaying the series of observations she had of Luo Nan before and after they left the elevator. She thought over and over before speaking. He's absent-minded. He's a bit impatient. His eyelids drooped. He has no interest in Tianbang's words. At the same time, the tips of his feet turned outward, and his body leaned to the side. He's been wanting to leave. Why did such a situation occur? Oh, it's very likely that he received important information that needed to be processed. His and Tianxi's expressions and actions were quite obvious when we were at the water bar. Mrs. Halder continued to ask questions, not giving Yinlu a chance to catch her breath. This is the main reason why Luo Nan is impatient. But when faced with a person like Tianbang, even if he doesn't have a deep hatred like we do, and even if he isn't a close friend, he is still a stakeholder. Don't tell me that he doesn't have the slightest desire to socialize? Yinlu muttered to herself. He's always been introverted. He's not good at socializing. What's the reason for this situation? Do you remember our conclusion from before? Luo Nan has a mask of weakness, and a mask of strength. If the mask of weakness was in effect, then he should have displayed a courteous, respectful, or shy appearance just now in order to obtain Tianbang's favorable impression. If the mask of strength was in effect, then sparks would have long since exploded between the two. And no matter what kind of mask it is, it wouldn't have this sort of effect. Yinlu responded instinctively, he has a third mask. Chapter 629. Fei Jin had already boarded the streetcar heading to Acumen College. Luo Nan had been delayed by Tianbang, so he had most likely missed this train. The two controllers didn't feel that this was a pity. This sort of chance encounter was not worth it, especially since Luo Nan was at the most critical moment of his mental analysis. The Blood Flame Order's base in Xia City quieted down as well. Mrs. Halder had roughly finished categorizing the intelligence data and was put together for the final time. She pulled out the third set of data that had never been put to use before. It was the list of Luo Nan's discussions of cultivation theory and lectures. She paused for a moment and searched through the other two groups, especially the group with the mask of strength. She put the data in one by one. Inla calmed down and carefully observed. She discovered that the new data that Mrs. Halder had put in belonged to Luo Nan's performance when he dealt with Grey personnel. The so-called Grey personnel were neither friend nor foe. They were people who lacked friendship and good feelings. They were people who couldn't be considered mortal enemies. It wasn't just Tian Bang, the gossip's lord, who had just spouted trouble, and OK, who had a conflict a few days ago over the location of the elusive secret device, were all in this group. If one were to go even further back, there were also a few ignorant second generations who dared to stroke a tiger's whiskers in the Ocean Sky Cloud City and Aurora Cloud City incident. There were also a few people from the management company in the Municipal Plaza incident. There were also a few people from the outer circle, represented by Hidong Lu, who were neither friendly nor aloof. Right now, Inlu didn't need Mrs. Halder's guidance. Her mind was like a movie. She sorted through the data, and a certain impression formed. She opened her mouth, wanting to speak, but she forcefully restrained herself. If you want to say it, then say it. Mrs. Halder's keen insight was displayed in full force at this moment. Inlu adjusted her breathing and said softly, I believe that Luo Nan is very distant from these people. Yes, distant. Aside from the few moments when he was stimulated to explode, where he had clear hostility and even killing intent, he basically ignored them. He was stiff, his thoughts jumped, and his mind was absent-minded. His mind wasn't on face-to-face communication at all. He was on a completely different frequency than these people. So, Mrs. Halder asked softly. Inlu was about to come to a conclusion, but she hesitated before she said, There's no strict classification of personas. It doesn't matter if it's the third persona. Perhaps we can call it the mask of alienation, for convenience. But we have to find the behind-the-scenes mechanism of its formation and operation to make sense. Mrs. Halder did not even raise her head. In other words, you only saw his attitude, but not his logic. Inla said, Boss, I believe that a person's thoughts and emotions are always continuous. From an outsider's point of view, it looked like it was jumping and torn, but from the person's point of view, it might be consistent and complete. It's just that we can't peek into people's hearts. We can only guess. Mrs. Halder interrupted her. Do you have any ideas? Inla took another breath and took the initiative to flip through the materials. She spent a few minutes and found two rather special examples in the third type of materials. During the Ocean Sky Cloud City incident, Luo Nan, Black Beetle, Puppeteer, Snake Tongue, and the others had a relatively long exchange during the deadlock stage. The contents were all related to formatting theory, such as order frames, gear coupling, and so on. Even further back, during the Fudong Avenue Frost River reality incident, he and Fairchild, who had yet to be identified as friend or foe, engaged in a cultivation discussion that was completely incompatible with the atmosphere. And when I looked through the communication records of the time, Luo Nan had an argument with the support personnel of the Xia City branch. The logic was disjointed, making communication difficult. Of course, there were elements of formatting theory interspersed within. That's right. Inla clenched her fists as she let out a low cry. She was a bit annoyed, but she was even more excited. Actually, Mrs. Halder had long ago categorized all of this information. It was the same as giving her the most clear guidance. When the frequency was in sync, her train of thought naturally connected and flowed smoothly. I overlooked one point before. Formatting theory. This was the foundation of Luo Nan's existence. It was the foundation that separated him from external social relations. It was the foundation that was truly internalized. And the process of internalizing formatting theory should be the core element that influenced the composition of his personality. Then, I must start from the interaction between him and formatting theory. Yes, it can't be pure theory. There is also the enormous social and interpersonal pressure associated with it. Mrs. Halder's expression did not change. Her fingertips moved forward through a series of documents, finally stopping at a certain node. Luo Nan's formal contact with formatting theory should have been over 5 years ago. He was 10 years old at the time. A 10-year-old child with no foundation, no investment, no support. Yet he resisted the enormous pressure to learn and inherit his grandfather's theory and grudges. There should be a sufficiently powerful motivation, right? Inlu didn't hesitate to respond. His family changed greatly when he was young. His grandfather, father, mother, and practically all of his immediate family members were caught in the maelstrom of formatting theory. They were even annihilated. This stimulation was enough. You just mentioned the interaction. Formatting theory has the value of allowing him to continue researching it in depth. Also, there is the effect of empathy. Through research, he can converse with his relatives and elders. This is an extremely important psychological compensation. Of course, it is also a driving force. Mrs. Holder raised an eyebrow. So we need to consider what he has experienced in this series of processes. We need to consider what he has obtained. I remember that before Luo Nan made his debut, his results were a series of neurological drugs. How did he obtain them? Inla closed her eyes slightly. She put herself in Luo Nan's shoes and thought for a moment. She answered her own question. I heard that Luo Nan didn't have the conditions to test drugs. He could only use himself as a test subject. Of course, this process was filled with endless failures. It was extremely dangerous. He even struggled on the line between life and death. There was certainly anxiety, panic, self-doubt, and so on during this process. There were enormous sources of negative emotions. Mrs. Holder's voice entered her ears. But he has walked all the way to where he is now. He has obtained absolute accomplishments. So he has also obtained powerful self-confidence. No, that's wrong. Inli's eyes were still closed. She denied her initial inference. This was because there weren't many circumstances that matched Luo Nan's performance in reality. He wasn't a proud and self-confident person. It is said that the basis of his series of research and experiments all came from his grandfather's notes. In that case, he doesn't trust himself. He trusts his grandfather's theory. Formatting theory. Inla suddenly opened her eyes. That's right. From Luo Nan's perspective, researching formatting theory is tantamount to having an endless conversation with formatting theory. He is endlessly receiving the guidance of his grandfather. He is endlessly overcoming challenges, obtaining sufficient positive feedback from them, and he continues to strengthen his confidence and dedication towards this theory. At the same time, the process of loneliness has given him no reference to compare himself to. It has strengthened his mentality by a factor of 2. So this has turned him into a person who has internalized the ideals of formatting theory. He has used the ruler of ideals to measure things internally and externally, to others and to himself. So, this isn't a mask of alienation. It's a mask of ideals. He is a young man who uses theoretical research every day to converse with his grandfather and his parents. Laughing and cursing in anger, warm and cold, and other socializing traits are really useless. It would be better to use formatting theory to evaluate and test him. If there's meaning, then he'll research. If there's no meaning, then he'll ignore it. This is the standard by which he conducts his judgment. This is his true dominant mask. Chapter 630. She roughly understood the classification of Luo Nan's persona masks. There were far too many examples that she could refer to. The persona mask was essentially an archetype theory. Once the archetype was extracted, she could always find similar cases that corresponded with it. People like Luo Nan have existed since ancient times. Inla wanted to make a further analysis. What followed next seemed to be much easier. After all, even if she ignored all sorts of medical cases, a few famous people could still reflect each other. This was especially true in the East Asian cultural area with its long history of civilization. There were far too many famous people throughout history who wore a persona mask. Li's thoughts spun and she thought of a fellow who was quite similar to Luo Nan. This person was a famous historian and politician. He belonged to the conservative faction. His mind was filled with patriarchal principles. He shut himself in a basement to write books for 15 years. The relevant concepts were completely internalized. Later on, when he was in power and governed the country, he would only listen to his ideas. He became a typical representative of people who talked reason behind closed doors. Don't casually bring out examples. Don't do stupid things like using words to destroy the meaning. Mrs. Holder saw through Li's thoughts. She didn't let her thoughts wander too far. Luo Nan himself possesses an extremely special nature. No famous historical figure would have a semi-philosophical system like formatting theory, where the mighty power belongs to the self. Moreover, it can be practiced, applied, and modified at any time. Modified? Lu was a bit stunned. Wasn't Luo Nan's persona mask an extreme paranoia towards formatting theory? In this way, he should be like that extremely conservative historian. He couldn't change the laws of his ancestors in the slightest. Oh, hold on. There seems to be a problem with the direction. Mrs. Holder didn't test Lu any further. She straightforwardly expressed her opinion. Perhaps Luo Nan himself doesn't believe that formatting theory is completely correct. This can be seen from his attitude during the lecture on the 14th. Back then, his speech was quite cautious. He always used self-mockery and jokes to dispel the extreme authority of formatting theory. Let's not talk about the more complicated background for now. From the analysis of these circumstances and the information we know, he is very stubborn towards formatting theory. However, he doesn't have a particularly paranoid view towards whether formatting theory is correct or not. In the end, his stubbornness towards formatting theory is just a kind of empathy. The ideals of formatting theory are just a mask he uses to treat his imaginary close relatives. This is because he only has this mask to choose from when facing his grandfather and parents in the void. To put it more bluntly, he is only courting. The word courting was a rather sensitive word. There were two ways to interpret it in the dictionary, and what the two first oblatums were communicating was obviously the more ancient kind, which was simply seeking affection. Is it a need for emotions and belonging? Lu took the initiative to analyze using Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Madame Holder agreed. You can say it that way. There is a high probability that Luo Nan himself is on the third level. He urgently needs the comfort of the relevant emotions. This is a pretty good starting point. But soon, she changed the topic. But at the same time, you have to understand the influence of empathy. After a long period of empathy, to a certain extent, he was the projection of his grandfather and parents' needs. He wanted to fulfill the wishes of his closest kin, which made his needs much greater than that of a normal person. In such a situation, he would most likely have the problem of being closely involved in the situation, and might not understand what he really needed. If we start from the emotional aspect, it might seem like a straight line, but it might actually be the most difficult path. This was equivalent to denying Li's thoughts. Li's eyebrows knitted together. She felt that it was a bit of a pity. After all, it's a core element. Mrs. Holder's lips hooked slightly. We aren't psychologists. We have no reason to treat him. Am I right? Okay, this reason was quite strong. Lu was dumbfounded. Of course, Lu understood Mrs. Holder's true meaning. If Luo Nan's core driving force was said to be courting, then the various personality masks were the outer muscles and bones. Using courting as the foundation to expand his mental power would form a permeating influence on all the personality masks. But this influence was distorted by his primal instincts and other factors, forming a bewildering barrier that Luo Nan himself might not be clear about. So he still relied on the personality mask, both consciously and unconsciously, when it came to dealing with people and matters. In front of this defensive maze, the scalpel that was suitable for surgery might not be suitable for psychological attacks. Lu wasn't dejected. Instead, she felt that her thoughts were becoming clearer and clearer. Of course, her boss was far better than her boss. With her boss protecting her, she tried to continue deducing in a different direction. Then we can only start from the mask. Go from shallow to deep. Which mask? Of course it's the concept mask. There's no harm in being more specific. Yes, boss. Lu wasn't stingy with her words. She narrated her train of thought, allowing her boss to examine, refer, and verify. I'm using the method of elimination. Even if I can't be considered the dominant position of the concept mask, the other two masks need not be mentioned. The strong mask is too straightforward and simple. There's no way to beat around the bush. No matter who wins or loses, one side is bound to be smashed to pieces. It's not suitable. As for the weak mask, we can only start from emotions. The reason we can't do this is because there are too many uncontrollable factors, boss. Plus, under the influence of the core driving force of courting, we can deduce that this mask is actually an important source of replenishment for the psychological needs of courting. It looks weak, but it's actually extremely selfish and sensitive. I'm afraid that the concept mask on the other side will also be staring at us while we stare at this mask. If we aren't careful, we'll make a mistake and cause trouble. Mrs. Holder nodded slightly. Then we can only use the concept mask. Yes. Is there a better reason? Stability. The greatest advantage of the concept mask is stability. Mrs. Holder gave a smile that wasn't a smile. Are you sure? I'm sure. Ian Lee's thoughts reached this point, and she already grasped the pearl of wisdom. During the formation process of the concept mask, Luo Nan was in an extreme environment. He lacked a sense of security, and he lacked true communication. Therefore, there's a high probability that he's a latent perfectionist with obsessive-compulsive symptoms. Sometimes, he'll be extremely anxious, impatient, and weak. This matches with my previous analysis. But due to the special characteristics of the concept mask, the pressure of the symbiotic emotional and psychological elements will shift to other masks. This will become a high-probability event. For example, anxiety, panic, and weakness will be thrown to the weak mask. Ego, pride, and so on will be thrown to the strong mask. The elements left behind in the concept mask are relatively perfect. The more perfect it is, the more likely it will become the basis and yardstick for judgment. In this way, of the three main masks, the concept mask will inevitably be the core. The weak mask and the strong mask will wait for an opportunity to appear. From Luo Nan's daily behavior, he would be fine in a relatively simple situation. He would use the weak mask in front of friends and family to obtain sympathy and love. He would use the strong mask to erupt in front of a great enemy from the inner world, killing his way through. At this time, the two masks are relatively stable. His behavior and train of thought are easy to estimate. But the problem is that these are two completely different concepts and methods. I can't find a point of compromise between them. It would be fine if the logic of behavior was completely different from that of the inner world and that of the secular world. But there are quite a few overlaps. This creates a barrier. It creates a separation and a tear in behavior. Once the situation becomes complicated, for example in the water bar, where Big Mouth Chow of the Divine Research Society was disrespectful to his mother, the weak mask and the strong mask instantly switch. Luo Nan wanted to kill Big Mouth Chow, but his target was just an ordinary person with enmity. And because of Fei Jin's interference, the situation didn't reach its worst state. In this way, the strong mask wasn't completely suitable, and the weak mask didn't have the space to make an appearance. A tear was created, and the concept mask naturally filled in this gap. Luo Nan made a judgment based on the concept mask. Big Mouth Chow wasn't worth analyzing and pondering. There was no need to waste energy on him and create more trouble. So he restrained his emotions, and Big Mouth Chow was able to preserve his life. In those few seconds, whether it was the weak mask or the strong mask, all of them revealed their unstable characteristics. Only the concept mask became the basis for Luo Nan's behavior. Ian Lee's analysis took a long time, but the result was extremely clear. Though this is just an independent incident, I believe that a careful analysis of all of Luo Nan's related incidents will lead to this conclusion. Any long-term contact with his weak mask or strong mask, under the influence of many factors, will ultimately face the judgment of the concept mask. Rather than this, it would be better to make preparations to communicate with the concept mask from the very beginning. This way, the uncertainties will be reduced to the minimum. Mrs. Holder listened quietly. She no longer tidied up the materials. In the end, she even narrowed her eyes. Her face was like an ancient well without ripples, concealing all of her emotions. Ian Lu had been brimming with confidence when she made a long speech, but she felt an inexplicable lack of confidence when she saw this situation. Boss, did I say something wrong? No, you didn't. Unless we are able to squeeze into Luo Nan's circle of friends and family in the first instance, this is the only path we can take. Mrs. Holder opened her eyes, but her gaze was cast toward the neon-changing night sky outside the window. I was just thinking that headquarters of the Ability User Society, as well as a few other people, were in a rush to appear. They didn't complete their task, but they did leave us plenty of references. We can be considered lucky, but will we succeed in one fell swoop? Or will we become one of the many examples for others to analyze and ridicule? Boss. Lu was shocked and at a loss. She didn't know why Mrs. Holder had suddenly sighed with emotion. Those who predict others also predict others. Those who know others don't necessarily know themselves. Only with this kind of self-awareness can we face the future with a good attitude. Mrs. Holder chuckled. Her gaze turned to Li's youthful, tender, and beautiful face. Let's do things according to your train of thought. Come up with a plan tonight and let me see it tomorrow morning. All right. Take Fei Jean home first. Don't let anything go wrong. With that, she stood up and walked out of the room. Boss. You're going out to relax. Chapter 631. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning. The main restaurant of the Starry Sky Club was temporarily quiet. As the manager, Sun Jiaoyi didn't hesitate to use her privilege to give herself a day off. She took her new prey back to Xia City for fun. Walking in the empty underground garage, they talked and laughed. It was inevitable that they would have some physical contact. Sun Jiaoyi didn't know which detail aroused her desire. She suddenly pressed the young female model against the hood of the car. Her hands moved up and down as the model groaned in pain. The female model was startled and struggled instinctively. Godmother, this is the surveillance area. Sun Jiaoyi didn't even raise her head. Only her laughter came from the place where they touched. Enjoy yourself in time. Be timely. The female model didn't struggle and half of her clothes were taken off. She didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the one on top of her stopped moving. Their bodies were squeezed together and slightly trembled with their breaths. Godmother? The female model asked in a daze. That's why I said this kind of problem will happen if I'm not timely. Sun Jiaoyi sighed and straightened up. She inserted her fingers into her short but thick hair and combed it a little. Then, her smile was bright and brilliant. Even though she was old enough to be the mother of the female model, her carefree and casual attitude was far beyond the pretentious handsome men and beautiful women in the circle. She patted the female model's cheek. Plans can't keep up with changes. Something is coming. Go back to the club and have a rest. I'll come to you after I deal with things. The female model was pulled up. She was confused and let Sun Jiaoyi tidy up her clothes. Sun Jiaoyi's actions were gentle and affectionate. She was a little moved. Godmother, I'll accompany you. Sun Jiaoyi just smiled. At this time, the butterfly door of the sports car opened. She gave the female model another gentle kiss and then sat in the car, isolated from the outside world. The sports car roared. It drove out of the parking space and sped up in the underground garage. In the car, Sun Jiaoyi looks at the rearview mirror. Of course, she is not looking at her goddaughter, who is still confused behind the car. She wants to confirm whether the person who made her get into the car, licked the back of her neck with invisible flames, and threatened her life is the person she guesses. There was a figure in the rearview mirror. But just by looking at his face, it was an unfamiliar face that he had never seen before. It was a young married woman. She was somewhat good-looking and her makeup was exquisite, but it was hard to recognize her. Even though Sun Jiaoyi had undergone strict memory training, she still hesitated for a moment before confirming that she had indeed never met this person before. However, the flickering flames in his eyes gave Sun Jiaoyi more confidence. Directly oppressing the medulla oblongata, disrupting the blood vessel's activity, but it seems to exist but not exist, and enter but not enter. Such exquisite control of flames. Madam? In the back seat, the young woman's lips curled up. It wasn't a particularly stunning face, but because of this micro-expression, it brought about an extraordinary aura. Sun Jiaoyi confirmed it and sighed. Madam, where do you want to go? The young woman casually said. Anywhere. I'm bored and want to talk to someone. All right. Sun Jiaoyi's index finger tapped on the steering wheel twice, and the car's AI kicked in, entering autopilot mode. This sort of basic function was fine, but why didn't it do its job when she wanted it to guard against theft? Sun Jiaoyi sighed again, but she didn't turn her head. She propped one hand on the steering wheel and continued combing her hair with the other. Her body language carried a bit of helplessness. Madam, we actually don't need to meet in this manner. Even if we want to be safe, we can just use a ready-made tool like Fei Jean. Right now in Xia City, There are less and less soul envoys of your order. It's too much of a pity to use them and then scrap them. It's nothing. Compared to an insignificant soul envoy, it would be a real pity if your identity as multifaceted were to crumble. Oh. Sun Jiari, otherwise known as multifaceted, stopped what she was doing. Through the rearview mirror and the soul envoy, she locked gazes with Madame Holder, who was hundreds of kilometers away. Madam, are you still brooding over what happened at the seaside villa? Believe me, the Order of Souls. Don't worry about the Order of Souls. I came here today to express my gratitude. That persona intelligence gave us a very important inspiration. It also allowed us to clearly define the entry point for our work in the near future. It was excellent. Sun Jiai raised an eyebrow. You call this gratitude? Oh, I'm sorry. This is probably an overreaction from eating shitty chocolate. The scorching sensation at the back of her neck showed no signs of disappearing. It even increased. It was like the endless accumulation of negative emotions beneath Sun Jiai's smile. Therefore, Sun Jiai was like a gold medal after-sales service. No matter how great the customer's resentment was, she would always maintain her smile. Madam, based on our good business reputation, I feel that we can use a more appropriate method to deal with this problem. If the intelligence is flawed, we can discuss it further. If it doesn't work out, we can always go through the process of a refund. I said it before. The intelligence is excellent. But the more it is so, the more vexed I become towards your disgraceful behavior of marrying a woman to more than one marriage and the intentions behind it. This was true fire. Sun Jiai could even smell the strange smell of charred hair at the back of her head. There might even be the fragrance of meat mixed within. Sun Jiai didn't blink. Her smile didn't change. Think about my nickname, madam. Forgive me for being rude, but I'm not a full-time intelligence agent for your order. Madame Holder also sent a smile through the soul envoy. However, the multifaceted I know is a top-notch broker and intelligence expert who can cooperate with many large and medium-sized organizations, including the Blood Flame Order. He should have the corresponding professional qualities. But look at what you've done. You set up the persona intelligence report as a group message and gave it to almost everyone in your intelligence circle. Sun Jiai had no choice but to interrupt. Madam, it's my freedom to choose how I sell it. Furthermore, I've already stated this before I sold it. I admit that persona is expensive, and the content inside is also half-baked. But right now, Mr. Luo is the focus of the entire world. His intelligence is worth this price, even if it's just a summary article. A small premium is a very standard market practice. I believe that for all parties with interests, including the Blood Flame Order, this isn't much. Chapter 632. Sun Jiai finally blinked. Hint. Inside the carriage, Madame Holder's will transformed into a low vibration in the young woman's throat. You said to everyone, start from the angle of the mask, and that was the basic method to uncover the true value of the information. It was exactly according to your train of thought that Yin Lu and I took less than an hour to complete the clues and perfect the logic. The two of us can solve the problem. With your ability, can't you do it with a few psychologists? Once it's complete, the value of the information will definitely soar, and the profits will be 10 times more than what it is now. Why didn't you do such a good thing? Sun Jiai pressed her forehead and smiled helplessly. Madam, hearing you say that makes my heart ache. I'm afraid I've lost a lot of money in this business. Hiss. Speak properly. No matter how healthy your cardiovascular function is, if your medulla oblongata is burned through, it will be meaningless. Under the powerful pressure of the Yin flames, Sun Jiai's breathing became chaotic. Her heart beat wildly, and her brain lacked oxygen. She became dizzy and numb. Even so, she forced herself to maintain a smile and looked directly at the flickering flames in the rearview mirror. Madam, you think too highly of me. The burning sensation and pressure at the back of her neck eased. Sun Jiai seized the opportunity to spit out all the words she had been suppressing in her chest. You and Deputy Officiant Yin are both top-notch figures in the inner world. How can you force others to do what you can? Besides, I only named you because I saw Mr. Luo's age and dull personality. It doesn't match your great reputation, so I thought of it. This time, it was Sun Jiai's turn to be interrupted. The young woman's original voice rang out, conveying Madame Halder's will. It had nothing to do with Sun Jiai's defense. Of course I think highly of you. Our cooperation has been on and off for 15 years. Perhaps at that time, you were only at the age of your goddaughter. I have many goddaughters. Madam, which one are you talking about? Sun Jiai's forehead and back were already drenched in cold sweat. This was a natural reaction of her body, and she couldn't control it. Only the smile on her face was nearly perfect. Knowing that Sun Jiai was still spouting nonsense, Madame Halder no longer made meaningless threats. The woman in the front row had already used facts to prove that ordinary interrogation techniques had no significant effect on her. Madame Hard said, "From what I know, the name multifaceted has quite a bit of status in the intelligence circles of Xia City. But there aren't many people who know of your true identity. Do you remember how I found out about your identity? It's because of an investment." Oh! Sun Jiai's gaze swept over the rearview mirror, and she saw that the eyes behind the lenses were fiery and cold, so piercing that she almost narrowed her eyes. Since the other party had directly pointed it out, it would be too impolite to try to go around it. "Yes, I remember. At that time you were expanding your business and needed a large sum of money, and I happened to have a client who was looking for a project with a higher return on investment. Then, I did my job and became the intermediary between the two of you. After a while, you got to know each other." The young woman in the back seat laughed. "How broad-minded." "In my memory, I contacted that investor very quickly and started a deeper cooperation. I tossed you to the side and saved quite a bit of intermediary fees. But what made people sigh with emotion was that you easily acquiesced, and everyone maintained a cooperative relationship. Nothing went wrong." Sun Jiai lifted the short hair on her forehead, and her smile deepened. "Madam, have you always harbored a guilty conscience? I only remember that when the order withdrew from Xia City in a panic, I took the initiative to contact you. Of course, I knew very well that you wouldn't be of any help at that time. I just wanted to use you to try and convince that investor to continue to invest. But you disconnected at that time." "Oh, I'm sorry. I had too much fun that night. In the following period of time, my cooperation with you was completely severed. This was completely in sync with that investor's attitude. Madam, my business is limited to Xia City. But why is it that when the 2,000th of a misincident occurred? More accurately speaking, when the Hill of Bones where Jin Tong was buried appeared in the outer seas of Xia City, our relationship suddenly became closer?" Sun Jiai could only sigh. "Business is business. Madam, why do you have to be so calculative?" The sports car shuttled back and forth on the high-speed maglev roads of the mountainous region, but the car suddenly sank into a state of silence. The young woman's soul sender in the back seat seemed to have lost her soul once more. She didn't respond. Sun Jiai couldn't help but have a thought. If she were to jump out of the car right now, what were the chances of her escaping this life-threatening trouble? This silence lasted for 5 seconds, or maybe even 10. Only then did Madame Halder's will manifest once more through the voice of the young woman in the back seat. "Every time I hear the words business is business, I feel a chill in my heart. But when it comes from your own mouth, it feels completely different." The tone was gloomy and cold. It was vastly different from the overbearing feeling from before. This caused Sun Jiai to react a bit slower. Before she could figure out how to divert this dangerous topic, she was pierced by the flaming gaze of the car's rearview mirror. This soul sender was definitely crippled. An indescribable thought popped up in Sun Jiai's mind. Then she heard the other party's voice again. "You don't have to explain or hide it anymore. In the short term, my judgment of your identity will not change. I came to find you tonight and spoke to you. There was no element of probing in it. I just wanted to inform you and vent. Madam, I hope you can convey my attitude and the corresponding judgment to that person. I'm talking about the judgment of her current investment project." In the car, only the low voice of the soul sender reverberated. "You didn't give me the complete information. Instead, you acted like a foolish and greedy businessman. You dug out a gold mine but haven't fully explored its reserves yet. You couldn't wait to package it up and sell it off. You even married one woman to another. Do you feel that this gold mine is more effective and that you won't be able to sell it for a good price if you sell it later? Or do you not think highly of the gold mine's reserves, so you don't hesitate to ruin your reputation in order to make money first? Or do you want to deliberately muddy the waters and obtain even greater benefits from a level unknown to others? Out of respect for that investor, I choose the third option. Sun Jiari also fell silent. She no longer tried to correct Madame Holder's train of thought. The information you gave me seems to be a half-finished product. In reality, although the value of the complete information is high, it is very difficult to sell it for a suitable reason. The half-finished information doesn't have this kind of sensitivity. Instead, it is easier to conceal your intentions. Some people will mistakenly believe that gold has been dug out from the sand, but they will ignore the direction behind it. After all, Luo Nan is quite simple. His personality, strong points, and weak points can be discovered as long as one puts in a bit of thought. And it is because he is simple that there are only a limited number of places that can be used. If one side exerts force, the results will be obvious. If two sides exert force, there will be variables. And if more than three sides exert force together, it will become complete chaos. Under the interference of many sides, the designs and schemes of each side will not be able to achieve the desired results. The struggle surrounding Luo Nan will only become more complicated. Madame Holder took the initiative to stop and catch her breath upon speaking to this point. She even extinguished the invisible fire on the back of Sun Jiari's neck. Her attitude seemed to be easing up. Her originally straight back leaned back, making her look more like a passenger hitching a ride. She even asked for some opinions. Aren't there too many elements of conjecture? Sun Jiari thought for a moment and said, there has to be a source of inspiration. A bit of stimulation or something. Yeah, there are two sources. The first is Yin Lu. She said that the uncertainties need to be reduced to a minimum. I have a very bad feeling about this. The second one. Do you know that Luo Nan and Tian Bang ran into each other on the streets tonight? I haven't received any tip-offs yet. But Madam said that they ran into each other by chance. I think that it really was a coincidence. Perhaps. But with Tian Bang's intelligence, how could he not know that communicating with Luo Nan in a hurry would only irritate him? He wouldn't achieve any results? And with his personality, he would probably rather bump into He Yuan's cold rebuke than engage in a meaningless entanglement with Luo Nan. So I believe that even if this encounter was a coincidence, he must have made some preparations in his mind. Perhaps he has grasped the principles and techniques of communicating with Luo Nan. Or perhaps he is still a bit lacking and wants to do some verification. He must have a share of your information. Now we can make the final inference. I once believed that you were making a fuss about Luo Nan. You used him as bait to draw away the attention of others, making it convenient for you to act. But then I thought of something she once told me. Investors act sneakily for the sake of controlling costs. But in the end, they always need an enthusiastic response. After a brief pause, the young woman in the back seat spat out a clear word from her lips. The blood flame order has been forcefully stopped before they can obtain an enthusiastic response. But you guys are already reaping the rewards from Luo Nan, right? If this is the case, I can roughly guess the position of that investor. The sports car had already driven onto the ring highway by now. The northern boundary of Xia City was higher in altitude. Looking through the front windshield of the car, most of the city district of Xia City was converged into a sea of lights. It was truly beautiful. And the mountainous region the car drove through became a scene of thick ink. It was connected to the faraway corners of the stars. The sports car pierced through the barrier of the air, whistling through the air with a humming sound. It was as if it had crossed the boundary between the wilderness and civilization in an instant. It was as if it had traveled from one dimension to another. Nothing seemed to have changed, but in reality, the endlessly expanding air pressure within the sports car was like an incorporeal bomb. It could explode at any moment. Sun Jiai's voice came from the front driver's seat at a certain point before the explosion. It was just that it carried a peculiar tone. I've always been amazed by your gambling decisiveness. At the same time, I have reservations about your self-destructing inner core. This kind of heart isn't a good place to be. In the back seat, the soul sender suddenly raised his head. The eyes reflected in the rearview mirror were truly burning. Chapter 633. It was not even 7 o'clock in the morning. The winter solstice had just passed, and the early morning of Xia City did not provide enough light. The faint light from the sky could not penetrate the lake, so the bottom of the lake was still dark from the public activity area. Only when the enormous devil ray swam past the protective glass did the water become somewhat lively. Xie Junping did his morning exercise all the way to school. He bought some snacks on the way and arrived at North Shore Gear. He arrived relatively early. There was no one here except for Shui Lei, who woke up earlier than him, and Cat Eyes, who was yawning. Cat Eyes had it the hardest out of everyone. It was her turn to be on duty last night. Faced with a beauty, Xie Junping had to find something to say. "Where's Teacher Luo?" Hehe. Xie Junping immediately understood. "He's in seclusion again." Cat Eyes curled her lips. Nth time he pulled an all-nighter. Shui Lei defended her. "Sister Cat Eyes, didn't you say that he just received some important information last night?" "What information?" Xie Junping was very curious. Cat Eyes yawned again. "It seems to be a collection of theses written by his mother when she was alive. Senior Sister Qingwen's theses can be found in the school library and journal websites. It seems to be an unfinished work. It hasn't been officially published. It's the present he received from the meeting with Professor Pan last night." "No wonder." Xie Junping understood and expressed an optimistic attitude. "A few theses. They're unfinished. They won't take long. They're just mementos." Cat Eyes extended 4 fingers. 4 petabytes. Those documents are 4 petabytes in size. Xie Junping was smashed silly. 4 petabytes? With such a size, even the most realistic virtual reality documents would have hundreds to thousands of hours of playback time, let alone ordinary words and pictures. Cat Eyes chuckled. He really sank in. When he comes out, this semester will be over. Xie Junping immediately cried out. "Don't. The real-time check-in system is getting more and more perverted. 3 to 5 days is fine, but if he really is in seclusion for a long time, even if I bring out the headmaster, it won't work." Cat Eyes gave Xie Junping a rare pat on the shoulder. "Might as well suspend him from school." "Humph, I thought he was a little sober, but it turns out he's still in a daze." What a waste of breath. The beauty's intimate attitude made Xie Junping's brain heat up, and he couldn't control his mouth. "That means you still haven't given me enough." "Aya." In the next second, Xie Junping fell to the ground along with the chair. He was confused. This was the only drawback after becoming half an insider. Cat Eyes and the others knew that he was no longer a little newbie who would die with a single poke. They did not hold back when they attacked. It was a pity that he had not truly awakened yet. What would they do if something bad happened to him? Xie Junping was about to protest loudly when Jerry, who had just successfully stolen some snacks, happily stepped over his chest and used his face as a stepping stone to jump forward. F***CK. Unfilial son. Xie Junping spat twice and casually scooped up a leg instead of Jerry, who had maxed out his agility. "Hey, Nanster." Ignoring Xie Junping's sorry state, Jerry was quite excited. He tugged at the person's trousers and climbed up. In the blink of an eye, he scurried up to the person's chest. The person took advantage of the situation and pulled the muskrat into his embrace. Beautifully done. When Xie Junping heard these words, he simply wanted to use some strength to knock Luo Nan down. However, Luo Nan had already awakened. He relied on his fleshly body cultivation to take root beneath his feet. He was not someone a little newbie plus 1 level ability user could shake. Helpless, Xie Junping slapped the floor and grumbled as he struggled to get up. Cat Eyes was a bit baffled. "You're in a pretty good mood?" Luo Nan sat in front of the bar and revealed a smile to everyone. His smile was more persuasive than any words. Cat Eyes became even more baffled. Not even 8 hours had passed. He had just slept. No, this bro didn't sleep at all last night. How could a person's mood undergo such an earth-shattering change? Cat Eyes blinked and asked subconsciously, "Have you finished looking through all the information?" Luo Nan picked up a snack and stuffed it into his mouth. He answered vaguely, "How is that possible? There are so many. It would be hard to go through them in 2 or 3 years. Take your time. I'll look through them bit by bit. Don't overlook anything." Cat Eyes reached out to probe his forehead, but Luo Nan slapped her hand down in a bad mood. The group looked at each other in dismay. They had no idea where Luo Nan's appearance of great enlightenment came from. Actually, if the two first oblatums of the Blood Flame Order, who had been busy all night, were invited over, they would be able to obtain the correct answer very quickly. They might even be able to make further deductions. However, no one here was omniscient and omnipotent. Everyone could only console themselves. In any case, this was a good thing. Afterwards, the group gathered around the bar to eat breakfast. Or perhaps it could be said to be the dessert before the meal. The food that Xie Junping had casually bought was just enough to fill the gaps between the teeth of these ability users. The true breakfast was brought over by Qin Ikuan, who was responsible for taking over the shift. Compared to normal people, it was at least 10 servings. There was even a meticulously brewed medicinal porridge inside. It had extraordinary effects and was expensive. It was hard to buy it on the market. All of this had to be shared with the entire team. Only Luo Nan, a dog who got rich from teaching, could afford it. At least half of the reason why Xie Junping woke up early was because of this medicinal porridge. Not only did Qin Ikuan bring the breakfast porridge, he also brought the latest news. Yesterday, the Xia City military sent a letter. They wish to cooperate with the branch to develop new business. It should be related to the purification of the mental plane. Cat Eyes laughed in spite of herself. When did the military start managing propaganda? Are they trying to meddle with ideology? Are they trying to rebel? It's not a rebellion. I'm saying that it has nothing to do with ideology. Qin Ikuan was careless and let Cat Eyes fly away. He laughed bitterly and was about to explain when Luo Nan suddenly spoke up beside him. It's the scavenger. Yes, that's it. The cleansing and purification of illegal orders and black witchcraft in the Abyss region. It's to lower the rate of the so-called murder in the inner world. Qin Ikuan came to a realization after speaking. You know about it? Vice President, he mentioned it? No, Shangtian Bang said it last night. I bumped into him on the road. Luo Nan responded and didn't say anything else. Xue Lei, who had been eating with his head down, interrupted. He must have seen the use of the Blood Intent Ring's fortress. Last night, Brother Papercut and the others played with firecrackers the entire night. They had a lot of fun. Midnight even left a message in the group. She wants Nanster to develop some sail, thruster module, and a cannon and giant ship. Luo Nan grunted. I saw it too. I can give it a try later. The configuration is easy to talk about, but to turn it into a product, it will most likely take the form of a paper talisman. Chapter 634. Cat Eyes and Qin Ikuan knew very well that Luo Nan had recently been struggling with the configuration domain. Luo Nan's main direction of study was basic research, not applied development. Therefore, the research and development of the Blood Intent Ring and its surrounding products were no longer on Luo Nan's mind. He had to wait for Gao Meng and Papercut to come knocking on his door before he could discuss it. But in the end, this was still a matter of a single thought. If Teacher Luo Nan was in a good mood, it wasn't a big deal for him to say a few more words. Cat Eyes just seized the opportunity to ridicule him. Qin Ikuan, Luo Nan, and the others all automatically skipped over her. Luo Nan was in a pretty good mood this morning. Next, he continued to explain the current situation of the Ring of Blood Will Fortress. The talisman cheat can only be a temporary product. If the fortress platform only needs 3 to 5 functions, it can still be of some use. Once the demand for functions increases, just thinking about how to distribute them will be troublesome. Cat Eyes made a tisse sound. It will definitely be troublesome on the society's side. But if it's on Tian Bang's side, then it won't be a problem. Qin Ikuan nodded in agreement. It's the military after all. Their organization is very strong. They definitely have the confidence. Xie Junping was amused by their conversation. He swallowed the hot porridge with great difficulty and chuckled. Every time we go on a mission, we have to distribute weapons, equip ourselves, and then we have to hang talismans on them. Could it be that this is the legendary divine possession, the descent of heavenly soldiers? Perhaps the old methods of talismans are similar in nature. Xue Lei was not superstitious, but he was keen on finding modern explanations for traditional projects. This was obviously due to his dojo background. Cat Eyes took the opportunity to combine similar items. This is Mr. Gao Daming's favorite topic. Audio has also researched this topic and has even published a thesis. In just a few sentences, the topic had wandered off. This was a normal conversation. Everyone gathered around the bar and chatted aimlessly until the other students arrived one after another. They entered and left, and the private space was completely occupied. At this moment, Ruiwen also arrived. The little girl had to eat breakfast at home to appease the elders. She left home a bit late today. There was less than 20 minutes before class started when she arrived at school. Even so, she still made a special trip to meet Luo Nan. Shuelei looked at his watch. Let's go. If we go now, we'll be able to catch the train. Oh, Nanster. We'll be together for the third period in the morning. Do you need me to sign for you? Luo Nan laughed. I won't make things difficult for Director Xie. I'll go by myself. The group of people looked at each other. TSKSK, there is indeed a problem. As a senior student who was about to graduate, Xie Juanping's schedule was much freer than that of middle school and high school students. He could sit paralyzed in his seat and press his stomach to digest the effects of the medicinal porridge, but his brain and mouth could not stay idle. He watched as Luo Nan and Shuelei entered the elevator. He smacked his lips, feeling rather baffled. This bro was just about to hire someone to hack the sign-in system. How come our teacher Luo was cured without even making a sound? Don't wimpy brats come and go for a while? Cat Eyes chuckled twice. She then greeted Qin Yikuan and went home to catch up on her sleep. Qin Yikuan stopped her with a wry smile. Wait, we went too far off topic just now. I almost forgot that Mr. Luo has a vote for the street sweeper. Now, he has a vote in any matter of the branch. Cat Eyes yawned. She was a bit impatient. You can just tell him directly. What does it have to do with me? But if Mr. Luo votes in favor and agrees to cooperate with the military, then it will be impossible. According to the relevant business requirements, he will be very busy for a period of time in the future. The corresponding security plans will need to be changed. Vice President, he hopes to communicate with us first. Cat Eyes raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that a certain person will agree? Yes, it really is possible based on the situation just now. But there's no need to look for me. I'm just being pulled in. I don't have much autonomy. You guys can discuss it and just notify me. Cat Eyes ignored Qin Yikuan's bafflement and walked straight out of gear on the north bank. The cold morning wind blew the fresh air of the jungle in the plaza in front of her. It was quite pleasant. She ignored the sneaky or bold gazes of a group of teenagers and stretched her body to her heart's content. The sunlight permeated through the gaps between the branches and leaves, gently touching her cheeks. It slightly raised the temperature of her skin and made a corner of her heart inexplicably warm. Oh, it couldn't be considered inexplicable. Cat Eyes could roughly sense that this was due to certain elements that hadn't been frozen for a long time within Luo Nan's tightly sealed system. It felt pretty good, but why? Cat Eyes' doubts also existed in Shuelei's mind. During the third morning class, Shuelei and Luo Nan sat together. The two of them didn't pay attention to what the teacher said on the podium. It must be said that Shuelei was an honest child. Normally, no matter how arduous his cultivation tasks were, he would listen to the class and complete the homework. He would earnestly complete all of them. And the reason why such a situation occurred today was because of Luo Nan's abnormal performance. He stared in a daze. Luo Nan's head hadn't been raised since the beginning of class. He opened up the split-page notebook that he always carried with him and placed it on the desk. He flipped it to the flexible e-ink screen page. The screen glowed with a lustrous radiance, forming a work area. A three-dimensional dynamic image file was being projected into the work area. The geometric structure displayed was very simple, and the projection effect was pretty good. It seemed to be rolling around in the palm of Luo Nan's hand, but he couldn't quite understand the markings on it. Luo Nan played this image file over and over again in the entire class, perhaps even the previous two classes. He played it over and over again without the slightest bit of boredom. Perhaps it was a configuration. Shuelei didn't really understand, so he could only make a blind guess. But the problem was, even if it was a configuration, what the hell was this state? From the side, the corner of Luo Nan's mouth was curled up. Sometimes, he even unconsciously cracked open, letting out a chuckle. He was in a completely selfless state. Let alone Shuelei, Even the students sitting to the side looked over from time to time. They were defeated by the ceaselessly rotating geometric structure time and time again. In the end, they gave up on understanding and used their gazes to classify Luo Nan as an abnormal person. In the beginning, Shuelei was cursing Luo Nan's mortal eyes. He couldn't recognize gods, Buddhas, immortals, and saints. But later, he saw Luo Nan chuckle more and more often. Sometimes, even his shoulders would shake. In the end, Shuelei was a bit flustered. Nanster? Ah, what? Luo Nan shifted his attention in a very normal manner. His face was blank. Shuelei hiccuped a few times, but he still asked directly, "This diagram of yours is a configuration, right? What's so interesting about it?" It's just a fragment. It doesn't have the meaning of a configuration. Luo Nan explained, but he lowered his head and laughed a few times as he spoke. Then Shuelei's ears trembled slightly. A message came from the psychic wave network. It was a recording that Luo Nan had shared with him. A woman's voice entered his ears. It was bright and clear. "Admit it. You're a negative number dregs in terms of configuration thinking. The more formulas you introduce, the more it proves that your thinking is chaotic." What followed was a man's rebuttal. It was unhurried and not slow, and it even carried a bit of an old-fashioned flavor. "Right now, what we need is a complete model. It's mathematical thinking and not hand-drawn. Qingwen, don't squander your talent. A certain someone's talent for mimicry is max. It just so happens that it's long range. Why don't you ask the teacher to give an evaluation?" He. Luo Nan propped his forehead with one hand to the side, burying his head in laughter. Shuelei didn't find the humor in this conversation, but the name mentioned made him flabbergasted. This is. Chapter 635. December 30th was a Sunday, the first day of the New Year's Day holiday. The flow of people on the streets soared again. The residents of the surrounding satellite cities also entered the main city area to spend their holidays. The exhaust exhaled by 200 million people raised the temperature of Xia City by 2 degrees, making the body feel more comfortable. Around the Shangding building and the surrounding high-rise buildings, the traffic on the guiding light track shuttled back and forth without beginning or end. Most of them were private cars, but there were also 100-jointed cars that had just been dismantled and landed on various platforms by the traction force. Zhang Yingying got out of a 100-jointed car and walked quickly into the Shangding building. When she climbed the stairs, she stepped on the last bit of red of the setting sun, adding a glazed luster to her white pencil pants and nude high heels, which attracted a lot of attention. But she didn't care about that. She raised her hand to look at her watch and sped up again. In the sound of her heels hitting the ground, she passed through the corridors of the interior floors of the building. After a lot of twists and turns, she finally arrived at the place. Conference room 1135, done. After making sure that she arrived before the appointed time, Zhang Yingying breathed a sigh of relief, adjusted her breathing, and pushed the door open. The circular conference room that could accommodate about 20 people was unexpectedly empty. There were only 3 or 4 people. Except for a staff member in charge of service, the rest were the same group. Not at the conference table, 2 bodyguards were sitting against the wall. At this time, they turned their heads and greeted her with a smile. "Yingying, you're here for a meeting?" "Big brother, Captain Gao." Zhang Yingying responded with the way she was used to, and then curled her lips. "His Majesty said he wouldn't come, but he only gave me half an hour to replace him. I climbed up from the bottom of the sea." While they were chatting, Zhang Yingying's eyes glanced at the young man at the conference table who was obviously a top perception master, but had no reaction to the changes in the outside world. Zhang Yingying gritted her teeth. "This guy." The 2 bodyguards laughed, but they had no intention of intervening. After the lecture on the 14th, in addition to the 2 concepts of cage and configuration that shook the world, the several bets that came before and after also painted the whole situation with a strange gossipy color. Many people in the inner world knew that the young genius, Teacher Luo, had a beautiful female guard beside him who was extremely eloquent. She had insulted the senior B-class expert, Ree, until she lost her composure and lost all face. As for Xia City, Zhang Yingying's favorable impression of Luo Nan was pretty much an open secret. It was just that Luo Nan, the main character and the core of this matter, didn't seem to have this awareness at all. This young man, who had just turned 16, seemed to always live in a dimension that was difficult for outsiders to understand. Sometimes he was depressed, and sometimes he was in high spirits. He did not seek external help and had his own logic. Luo Nan was earnestly looking at his flexible e-ink screen. He used his finger to open a folder. This was his mother's research data, which he had transferred from Professor Pan's cloud space. The theme of the information was modern architectural design, but for 99% of the world's designers, it was tantamount to a book that they could never understand. In the folder that he had just opened, there were about 7 or 8 different kinds of documents, from the most primitive observation data to intuitive three-dimensional models, including the corresponding analysis and calculation. There were also some ideas that were written down on the spot, recordings of discussions, and even videos left behind. These documents together formed a basic unit. It didn't revolve around design theories or cases, but rather a genuine basic configuration. It was just a fragment that had lost the meaning of the configuration. There were about 3,000 to 4,000 similar units. Together, they formed the accumulation of basic research data on the configuration. This was a gift from the heavens that Luo Nan didn't even dare to dream of. Mom must be watching me from the heavens. Luo Nan couldn't help but fantasize about these things. For the first time, he willingly crawled under the mighty power of fate, loudly praising it. He had once thought that since his mother was able to build a passageway that led to the clouds, she would certainly carry out explorations and research in that bizarre world. Thoughts were thoughts. But he never would have thought that the results of his mother's research were like a light boat crossing a specific path in the long river of time. They formed a predestined intersection with him, who had similarly chosen this path and was doing his best to row forward. The inheritance of fate was the highest reward for his 5 years of life and death struggle. Of course, Luo Nan wouldn't forget. He was very grateful to Professor Pan Wen, who had created, or at least accelerated, this intersection. There was also Tian 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 and Tian Tian, as well as all the people within this river of fate who had given him a boost. Hey, didn't you say that you were in a good mood? Why are you becoming more and more aloof? Zhang Yingying finally couldn't hold back. She slapped Luo Nan on the shoulder, announcing her existence. Luo Nan, who was wandering in the river of fate, was slapped onto the shore by Zhang Yingying's slap. He finally turned his head, but the side of his face met with an open lapel of a light-colored short-sleeved suit. He instinctively leaned back and saw a white-collared beauty with quite the intellectual and capable air. Zhang Yingying had one hand on the conference table. Her body leaned forward, and she was very close. She cast a very direct gaze on Luo Nan's face. From Luo Nan's perspective, Zhang Yingying's clothes were more meaningful. This sort of outfit stirred up even more of his memories and emotions. Luo Nan still remembered that just 3 months ago, this was the same person who had disguised herself as a lawyer and boarded the ship that blocked the mountain. She continued to participate and push, making him willingly enter the water. She walked step by step into the deep water, all the way until he entered the river channel that belonged solely to him. She obtained the highest reward. So Luo Nan was very grateful to her. It could be said that he didn't forget his old kindness. Luo Nan couldn't help but laugh. I was just thinking about you. Zhang Yingying was a bit stupefied, but when she saw Luo Nan's expression, she knew that she was thinking too much. Even so, she was still in a bit of a difficult situation for a short period of time. She didn't want to retreat and show weakness. She just subconsciously reached out to touch the flexible screen and opened a document in the folder. It was originally a meaningless action, but the complicated mathematical equations stung her eyes with a couple of glances. Do you understand these? Yeah, not really. Luo Nan was very honest. The information passed down by his mother was very detailed, but the level was also very high. Luo Nan still didn't understand some of the special algorithms involved. He probably needed to search for information or even learn the relevant knowledge on the spot. He would need to grind it down bit by bit. In these 2 days, Luo Nan specially selected recordings and videos to experience them one by one. He only skimmed through the rest of the information. He didn't read it in depth. Even so, he felt dizzy every time he looked at a few sets. It was hard for his mind to continue. Luo Nan laughed when he thought of this. What are you so happy about if you don't understand? Why can't I be happy if I don't understand? Fine. Luo Nan knew this. If it was the past, he would have been grinded to the point of insanity long ago. Just thoroughly understanding his mother's research data required a large amount of time. Uncovering the deeper mysteries of the cloud world was even more distant. Then killing Gong Qi was placed behind these two in order. Wouldn't it be even more meaningless? Luo Nan should be anxious, but right now his mood was strangely tranquil and joyful. Every folder contained detailed and clear information. It recorded the process of his mother's research back in the day. Looking at the daily logs and records, as well as the recordings and videos that appeared from time to time, was like learning and conversing with his mother. So Luo Nan knew. His mother's writing was clear, definite, and concise. But when she scribbled and discussed, it was inevitable that she would hesitate and struggle. Sometimes she would even have a bit of a temper. When she encountered obstacles, she would promptly communicate with others in addition to researching on her own. Most of the time it was in the form of brainstorming, letting many people participate. Among them were Professor Pan Wen, his grandfather, but most of them were that fellow. They discussed and even argued. They casually drew diagrams or more complex data formulas and so on. Luo Nan could understand some of them, but he couldn't understand some of them at all. But it didn't matter. He just quietly watched from the side. Every time this happened, his mood would be anxious and relaxed. He was like a glutton facing a delicacy. He wanted to swallow it clean in one gulp, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat it all. He could only taste it bit by bit. This feeling was strange, but it wasn't bad at all. Luo Nan chuckled. His laughter made Zhang Yingying's hair stand on end. And at this time, the door to the conference room was pushed open. A group of people came in one after another. Their gazes naturally focused on Luo Nan and Zhang Yingying. Some of them even revealed secretive smiles. TC. Zhang Yingying didn't want to be gossip material. She also didn't feel the need to deliberately keep her distance. She immediately pulled out a chair and sat next to Luo Nan. The conference room was quickly filled with people. The last to enter was He Yueyin. She was still dressed conservatively as an office lady. As the outsider for today's conference, Tian Bang entered a second before He Yueyin. He wore a military uniform that was rarely seen. The Major General's gold star on his shoulder made him look extremely sharp. But when he opened his mouth, he still had that relaxed and leisurely appearance. Oh, the protagonist has already arrived. His gaze fell directly on Luo Nan without the slightest bit of concealment. He Yueyin didn't exchange pleasantries. She didn't speak nonsense. She just nodded slightly at Luo Nan after sitting down. She said, "Next we'll have a meeting. We'll discuss the specific matters related to the scavenger project." During yesterday's video conference, the branch team had already reached a consensus. They basically agreed to cooperate with Xia City's government, the garrison force, and the East Sea Military Theater. We'll push forward with the research and development of this project. We invited Major General Tian to this meeting today to ask him to introduce the background of the project in detail. We'll discuss the functional requirements of the project, the technical bottleneck, the research and development plan, and other issues. We'll strive to form a framework and implement it as soon as possible. Her gaze fell on Tian Bang after she finished speaking. Tian Bang understood. He grinned and took over the conversation. "Today I've come here to discuss the scavenger project. Of course it's the first priority. But before that, we can't avoid the convention. We still need to pay our respects." Chapter 636. Right now, the people seated in the conference room included a B-rank power like Gao Meng, the vice president, 2 veteran deputy secretaries, and several members of the technical team. Basically, half of the technical elites of the Xia City branch were here. They all heard Tian Bang's absolute explanation, but no one expressed any dissatisfaction. What was there to doubt? The government and the military had clearly come for Luo Nan's Blood Will Ring fortress. This was the cornerstone of the cooperation between the two sides. Without this, any other terms would be meaningless. Needless to say, the 1,000-person lecture on the 14th of this month had already established Luo Nan's authoritative position in the mental side. The Blood Will Ring fortress was anchored in the depths of the Abyss region. Over 90% of the people in the conference room would go there from time to time to experience and research. Right now, There were quite a few people staring at Luo Nan with burning gazes. They wanted to find an opportunity to toss out all the doubts they had accumulated over the past few days, seeking a thorough understanding. Luo Nan did not know about these things, nor did he care. According to common sense, after Tian Bang's flattery, Luo Nan should have said a few polite words to complete the formalities. This was the custom of mutual business flattery. But Luo Nan did not react until Tian Bang finished speaking. He just sat steadily in the middle of the conference room and raised his head, indicating that he was listening to him. That was all. Fortunately, no one raised too high a demand for Luo Nan's conduct, especially Tian Bang himself. He had already experienced Luo Nan's apathy and dullness 2 nights ago, so he just laughed it off. Then he signaled to the staff to turn on the projection equipment and show the finished presentation to the participants. Of course, General Tian was a bit arrogant. He would not waste his breath explaining. The following introductions fell on the shoulders of his accompanying aide. Next, let me introduce the background of the project. The one who stood up to act as the speaker was Lieutenant Colonel Zhu Ling. This young soldier was also an old acquaintance of Luo Nan's. They had even eaten a meal together a few days ago because of the Thunder Falcon Dojo. Zhu Ling was different from his own sloppy superior. He always had a serious and upright expression. His figure was ramrod straight like a soldier, and he naturally brought the atmosphere of the conference on the right track. Luo Nan was a bit distracted at this time. The situation before him made him think of the mutant infection incident that he and Peony had dealt with together. There was a time when he had attached his soul to ink and participated in this kind of briefing. It seemed to be much more interesting than this. Another important reason was that the background information provided by the military was nothing new. Although Luo Nan wasn't present at the voting site yesterday, he was able to get a basic understanding of the situation through Tian Bang's prior communication. There weren't too many changes. Zhang Yingying, who was beside him, was a temporary helper who had been brought in when she was in seclusion. She didn't know much about the project, so she listened attentively at first. However, Zhang Yingying was in the most well-informed hidden indigo firm. Her accumulation of information was far from something a newbie like Luo Nan could compare with. She easily drew inferences about other cases from one case and understood the cause and effect. She lost interest and moved closer to Luo Nan to chat in a low voice. In the end, she was still able to keep up with today's main topic. The government and the military have finally found an opportunity. Luo Nan didn't refuse to whisper to his friend. He also wanted to hear Zhang Yingying's opinion. They have always disliked certain B-class experts and even transcendents from the inner world. I'm talking about the mental side. Especially people like Snake Tongue, who dabble in curses and witchcraft. Of course, there are also those illegal orders. They play with all kinds of blood sacrifices and black masses. Every year, several thousand lives are involved in the inner world murders. They want to control them, but they can't. They can't get any benefits either. Of course, they hate them to the bone. Zhang Yingying's explanation was very close to Tian Bang's, excluding a few subjective descriptions. She chuckled as she spoke. On the side of the government and the military, Old Gao and the others. Oh, and you as well. They are all criminals engaged in illegal construction. It's just that right now they're thinking of enlistment. Illegal construction. I don't think it counts. The Abyss region is more appropriate to call it a land outside of the law or a wilderness of the vast sea. Yes, Mr. Pioneer Luo Nan. In the ability system of the society, the code name of a B-class expert was architect. Some people say it was engineer, but the former was more appropriate. Of course, the fleshly body could be used as well. It wouldn't be wrong to say that the structure of the body and soul was constructed. However, the earliest source of this name was the so-called Abyss region architect. It referred to the mental side building their own house in the Abyss region. Everyone had an intuitive understanding of the vile environment of the Abyss region after the appearance of the fortress. It was absolutely not an easy task to complete the construction of structures there. Even a veteran B-class expert like Gao Meng could only plant simple structures such as the spirit glyph for a short period of time. They couldn't withstand the wind and rain for long periods of time. Even more amazing characters were able to retain some seeds and frames, and then construct more complex structures on top of them. Only transcendents were able to construct semi-permanent structures, forming all sorts of inconceivable effects. Reaching this step, one could already be called a god, according to the words of the various orders. Reaching this step, the so-called religious altar residents could already borrow the berserk and inexhaustible power of the abyss region. Its level and intensity far exceeded the limits of humans, forming a virtuous cycle. But how many transcendents were there in the world? Constructing structures in the abyss region was so difficult. It was inevitable that some people would come up with crooked ideas. They would forcefully seize a person's essence energy, stimulate a mortal's heart, extract soul strength through black witchcraft, evil sacrifices, and so on. These were the most common methods. There were also dark-side life forms like the human-faced arachnid. There were also some mutants that possessed special abilities. They were born to stir up trouble in the abyss region. Due to the special nature of this level, the effects were enormous. Some of them were even vile. This caused the already dangerous and complex abyss region to become even more foul. Looking at it from this angle, the work of scavengers was indeed necessary. The guide Zhu Ling just so happened to transform the relevant statistical data into an intuitive pie chart. He talked about how many types of illegal constructions were in the abyss region. He talked about how much direct damage was caused. He talked about how much trouble would radiate to the traditional 3 belts on the mental plane, and so on. Of course, he also talked about the benefits that would be brought to everyone's cultivation and lives after the governance was perfected. In short, he acted as if he had ample reasons and was worthy of trust. Gao Meng, who sat across from Luo Nan, let out a yawn. He was also one of the people who voted last night. He really wasn't interested in these official articles. He squinted his eyes to see Luo Nan and Zhang Yingying chatting happily. Then he thought about how he didn't stop Luo Nan last night. He felt a bit unbalanced in his mind. He knocked on the table. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.